Good morning. Today is Tuesday, October 1, 2019, the beginning of the third quarter of 2019. So welcome to the public who's tuned in either on television today or later on television to view this broadcast. Today our meeting will start with our adjustments to the agenda. Just want to announce we do have time certain items that begin at 10 a.m., 11 a.m., 1:30 p.m. I also want to announce that next week, Tuesday, October 8, we will start our meeting at 10:30 a.m. next week. We don't have any emergency business. Item 2 on our agenda. Our third item is public comments. Oh, I glossed over something. Back to number 1, adjustments to the agenda. Mr. Mokrahajski, do we have any other adjustments to the agenda? Okay. And we have no emergency business, so we're moving on now to public comments. We'd like to welcome everyone who's taken time, their busy lives, to come here to present public comment. This morning we'll be able to allocate 3 minutes to each person who is going to be coming up for public comment. I'll try to keep the names in a rotation of 3 names, and Chris McAllister can come forward. He'll be followed by Bill O'Brien, followed by David Piccioni, followed by Carl Eisenbach. And each person will be given the opportunity to introduce himself, tell us their name, tell us where they live, and then our vice chair will start the timer. That timer has a countdown to your right as you're facing the podium, and green light means your time is running. I think the yellow light means you have 30 seconds to go, and the red light means you're done with your 3 minutes, and I'll start asking you to wrap up your comments. So without further ado, we'll ask Mr. Chris McAllister to come forward. Welcome, Mr. McAllister, and please introduce yourself and tell us where you live and begin your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Chris McAllister, and I live in Springfield, Oregon. I'm here to talk to you about HB 2916. It was the only bill this year that was signed in by the governor that directly affects homeless people in a manner that can be done today. The reason why I say it can be done today, it was signed under emergency clause on June 21st of this year. What this is the ability to set up transitional campgrounds, such as what Opportunity Village is, around our community. The removal of a limit of 2 is part of this, why this bill is important. Before, there had only been 2 allowed in each UGB. It also explains that these can be done within the UGB, which includes urbanized, urbanizable, and city limits. Now, what makes this really spectacular, in my opinion, is we have an emergency right now, and we have healthcare needs. We need places for medically fragile people. We need places for people who are incontinent. Ironically, one of the few barriers for some of our emergency shelter that we have right now is that if you wet the bed, you don't have a place in Lane County. And having tried to help some of our seniors, which this issue is more prevalent, as well as some of our medically fragile who are going in and out of hospitalization and medical care, they need a place where they can sleep however comfortably they can, because they're already having enough issues with that condition. That said, it could also help families in a pinch right now. As we are gearing up towards winter, we need a place for people to be able to be found and then networked into our current system. It's great to have Dovetail, it's great to have our partners in our community, but if they can't find the families, if they can't find the singles, and if the people who are so sick that they need help can't be found because they don't have anywhere near urbanized areas to be, then we're going to lose those people. We've already lost several people in the last couple of months, and most of those deaths were preventable. Some of them were not, but quality of life was certainly able to be affected by not having a warm place to be, a place to access meds, or a place to stabilize. We have great outreach going out. We have the City of Eugene stepping up and moving forward on several its plans. Our county is really being persistent on finding options, and I have the honor to serve on the Shelter and Supportive Housing Committee with Commissioner Farr, where we're exploring options as we move out on the TAC report. However, we have an emergency and we need some emergency action now. Please look into HB 2916. Please explore what options we have available, and please look at the relationships with our rural and our local communities that are not Eugene. Thank you for your time and your service.
Thank you very much. Okay, Bill O'Brien, followed by David Piccioni, followed by Carl Eisenbach. Welcome, sir.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I live in Eugene. I guess in a way, I'd like to apologize to Jay Bosevich. It was about a week or so ago. I kind of cut him off when he made a comment, when he was going to make a comment on something I said, you know, so I apologize for that. I was listening to Think Out Loud, a program on KLCC at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and there was an ex, I forget her name, but an ex-defense attorney and from Seattle, and she works now with the, I guess, with the city of Seattle on all these homeless people that are there, and she mediates, I guess, between law enforcement and the social services, trying to bring more social services in. I found her talk very good. One of the things that, if I recall, what she said like it was mentioned that in Eugene, if you go to this court, I guess, I don't know if it's district court or the court in the library, there's a special court in the library, which I've never been to, but if they're taken to jail and if they're deemed dangerous to themselves or to others, they can be shuttled to Salem for an indeterminable amount of time. And I believe she said it could run $1,000 a day. It would be like whether to medicate them or not to medicate them, or if they have the rights not to refuse medication. And it just sounds really a crazy situation. And what little I know of that court in the library, if you end up there and you don't pay the fine, you may go to jail, but you may not go to jail because the jail is full. And it sounds like a crazy because, like the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, they say that it's not a crime to sleep somewhere. Though I'm sure that the trespassing, that's another matter. But I got 28 seconds. What else can I say? Last time I was here, I told a story that was kind of absurd, but it really happened. You know, could have been a dangerous situation, but just yesterday, or 2 days, in the last 2 days, there's this store, and there's this woman that's living there in the store, you know, and she has a daughter, and maybe she has mental health. She obviously has mental health history, and it's just like there are about 4 or 5 people taking care of her, and you know, she's old and enfeebled, and she's not going anywhere in a good situation. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Mr. Piccioni, followed by Carl Eisenbach.
Hello, I'm David Ivan Piccioni from Eugene, Oregon. I come to these meetings and I notice that people in the public express what they want, and they direct that expression towards you. We ask you to do these changes or make something happen. I believe that a lot of the same things that you guys and gals want, if dressed, so to speak, differently or expressed a little bit differently, could be the same thing that a lot of us have been saying, or a lot of people have been saying. So I would like, I mean, ideally, I would like everybody to hear in 3 minutes what you would consider, in a kind of selfish way, what is important to you personally. I mean, it might help others too, but that's good for you guys. About the immigration thing, I want to say this is a really touchy subject because there's very strong opinions on both sides. I don't want a lot of people coming from Latin America, but I mean, I came from Latin America at one point, but I don't want them to have to come here because they're being scared by the cartels. In my investigation, there's three things that people come to the America for. The drug cartels tell them to bring drugs over to the U.S., put them in you know where, and swallow these balloons, or we'll kill your whole family. That's what cartels. So that's one reason why people come here. Our intervention in their politics is another, and the free trade agreements also damage the country's livability and way to make money. So, so what I would recommend is, since the United States has by far the largest military out of all the countries, the second one being China, which we have 5 times the power that China has. And I don't think we're involved in good actions with our military. I think it would be a really good use of our military if they go and kind of get rid of the cartels, kill them, or put them in jail, whatever. But legitimize the use of plants and chemicals that people want to use, and not empower these guys to scare their population. You know, Colombia, Ecuador, Nicaragua.
Thank you so much for your public comment.
Thank you very much. I hope that was understandable. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next, Carl Eisenbach, and followed by Sandra Erickson. Did I get that right? Yes, Sandra Erickson and Sandy Mann. So welcome to Mr. Eisenbach. You'll have 3 minutes after you introduce yourself and tell us where you live.
Carl Eisenbach in Eugene. I had remarks, this is almost trite. I had remarks I was going to deliver today, but I decided to talk about something else. And everybody here knows what the political game is all about. Everybody has motives in terms of why you do what you do, okay? And I don't know about, I assume that you have the same thing that I do in terms of what I did when I went into public service, which is what I wanted to do was to do good for people. I wanted to make my society a better society. I didn't want to tear things down. I didn't want to create class conflict. I didn't want to create divisiveness. And it's sort of like, ultimately, when you get up in the morning and you look at yourself in the mirror and you say to yourself, have I done a good job or have I done a bad job? And I know, you know, how difficult it is to be in your position. I know how difficult it is to make decisions on very complex issues. And I know how crazy it gets in terms of mixing up, in terms of trying to do the right thing. And sometimes you have to do bad decisions. And it's not, there's maybe no other alternative, or politics goes against you, or whatever. But, you know, if you do this bad decision stuff, you look in your mirror and you see yourself, you say, well, maybe my motives were not as pure as they could be. Maybe I fell short of the standards of what I would want to do personally in public life. Maybe this is a little smelly or embarrassing, and I think that's where we are right now regarding the elections for the courthouse as compared to the elections for the housing bond. And I see that you're wrestling with a very complex set of issues here, and there's a certain morality going on because, you know, again, you're trying to do the best you possibly can for people. And I believe that the housing bond is the way to do that. And I also happen to believe, I think that it may be mutually exclusive in terms of the elections, whether we go for a housing bond or whether we go for a courthouse. And I really believe if you go for a courthouse, you're not maybe going to feel as good about yourself as if you went for a housing bond. Because obviously it's expensive. How many people does it benefit all throughout the county? What are the human needs that we're facing with? Is this, why we went into office? Did we go into office to help people or to make some people rich? What do you get out of making people rich? I mean, so I hope you do the right thing. I know that you haven't made any decisions about this yet. I'm hoping you have a good time, and just think about what I've said.
Thank you very much. Okay. Page 2, Ms. Erickson, please come forward. And Ms. Mann, please come up to the front row. So Ms. Erickson, same instruction. Give us your name, where you live, and our vice chair will start the timer for 3 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity. My name is Sandra Erickson, and I live in Eugene on Graham Drive, and I'm here to talk about a much more comprehensive idea about homelessness, and that is the concept of prevention. The fact that we have people living on the streets is a three-legged stool. It's emergency services, it's housing, and it's prevention. In the United States, only the first two are primarily addressed. You rarely hear the word prevention. Prevention involves an integrated coordination of all of the facilities available to a given jurisdiction. It involves the schools, city and county governments, it involves the state. Without a comprehensive long-term plan to prevent homelessness, it will continue to grow every single generation. It will not only grow, it will grow exponentially, and it will be overwhelming eventually. It can't not. For 30 years, I taught consumer education at City College in San Francisco. And I can tell you, we went all through returning Vietnam veterans who had never lived alone. We went through all of the so-called boat people. We had 11 different languages in any given class. It was what I would call, looking back, the trenches of trying to get people who had never been integrated into social systems integrated so they could be resilient and self-sufficient. It was successful. In 2004, the city of San Francisco stopped all of those programs simply because they needed the space in the facilities for technology. All good, all I understand all of that. But as a result, homelessness grew even faster, and now it is a pox on the city. People are moving out, including the tech they made room for, and it has come down the other side. Prevention involves education. Education is there to produce functional, resilient people, good citizens, and people that have a profession that can sustain them. Only 2 of those are being addressed on a county-wide level. We are falling short of producing human beings that have the knowledge, not just the life skills to get along with your neighbor, that have the actual knowledge on how complex American systems work. The systems of finance, health, foods and nutrition, medicine, housing, those are not simple systems anymore. And I would say that every single person in this room has come up against a wall in any given system at one point in their life where they really felt threatened.
Thank you so much for your public comment.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Sandy Mann. Welcome, Ms. Mann. You'll have 3 minutes after you give us your name and where you live.
Put my glasses on here. Thank you. Can you hear me all right? Good morning, Commissioners, County Administrator. My name is Sandy Mann from Eugene, Oregon, running for Lane County Commissioner, District 3. Okay, I agree with I haven't studied the housing bond issue, but it sounds like a good idea. I wanted to speak, I thought it would be on the agenda this morning, but I didn't see it about resetting district boundaries. Now that we have a more progressive board, I would urge you to reconsider setting the boundaries back to the way that they were. As I understand it, they were gerrymandered years ago under a less progressive board. And there was a private firm hired, I believe at taxpayer expense, and the boundaries were redrawn. So I urge you to visit that and draw them back to the way they were, so that would be fairer to all the constituents. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much. And I'd like to know when it would be on the agenda, if I could. I understood it would be today, so I don't know when it will be.
Next week. Yep.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay, so is there anyone else present that wants to make public comment who has not made public comment? All right, well, thank you very much for your public comment. Very helpful to the board. And just a note, we do have an evening public comment coming up on October 15 and December 17. So we have 2 evening public comment sessions in addition to our regular 9 a.m. public comment when we're meeting. So at this time, I'd like to turn to the commissioners, item number 4, and ask if any commissioners want to present any response to public comments or make a remonstrance. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, it'd be easy to respond to each person who spoke today. Thanks for being here. But Chris, I'm going to talk specifically to you, because you and I talk a lot. Back on September 10th, we had our last Children Supportive Housing Development Committee meeting. And at that time, I had a chance to talk about what I'm going to talk about next. We receive public testimony quite often from people who are asking us to do things that are new, novel, or outside of perhaps our strategic plan or our work plan that's existent. What you're asking for is not outside of our existing work plan. You're asking us to pay attention to House Bill 2196 signed by the governor. Now, the reason I say it's not outside of our work plan is back on September 10th, we passed Order and Resolution 190910-01. One of the whereases on that resolution, which I do carry with me, by the way, whereas the Board of Commissioners, through its multi-jurisdictional Poverty and Homelessness Board, its Intergovernmental Human Services Commission, and other work groups will continue to identify ways and means to end homelessness. Actually, it's means and ways, not ways and means, excuse me. To end homelessness. Therefore, the Lane County Board of Commissioners declares a homelessness emergency in Lane County. Now, resolutions quite often are symbolic, not really pertaining to existing work plans or existing tactics, but that whereas was added, I added that to this resolution to make sure that people understand that this resolution that we passed really refers to an ongoing work plan, and our ongoing work plan through the intergovernmental and interjurisdictional bodies that we participate in is to end homelessness in Lane County. Now, are we going to do it? Are we going to end homelessness in Lane County? No more than Food for Lane County is going to end hunger in Lane County. It's not going to happen. But that is what our goal is, and for the people who we can address, we are ending homelessness for individuals. You're talking about the very basic rights of people to sleep and to go to the bathroom. You mentioned incontinence and the exclusion that provides, that gives people from public shelter. And beyond that, we also talk about another initiative that you are strongly involved in, and that's making sure that people have their own clothes cleaned for them. Very simple things that we take for granted, Chris. You talk about them very often. Today you're talking about something that is very pertinent to our ongoing strategic plan and our work plan, and I thank you for being here this morning. Thanks, Chris. I have a few things I'll talk to Dave about. The Russian Federation actually has the largest military in the world, but we can talk more about other things. Thank you very much.
Okay. Do any other commissioners want to make any remonstrance? Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. I just first want to say thanks, Bill, for the apology. I don't even really remember the incident, so, but thank you anyway. And, I really felt David asked a really great question. why do we serve, what's important to us. And I serve out of a motivation to protect people's rights and those individual rights that are guaranteed under our Constitution, and to minimize the use of force and fraud against our citizens. And that's really why I serve. And I think the best way to do that is at the government closest to the people, which is local government, which is why I serve on Lane County government. For my district, for much of my district, I am the lowest level of government serving them. And for me, that's really what's important, is to, the government closest to the people and protecting those folks' rights, which means you can't ask for people to involuntarily give up their time and labor and the fruits of their labor. So it's quite often what people refer to as rights, if it involves taking other people's time and treasure, may not exactly be what I consider an individual right. Might be a human need, but it might not be a right. So with that, the other question was about, a courthouse not benefiting everybody. From another speaker this morning, the courthouse benefits every citizen in this county. Those rights are protected by the court system. And it's one of the most basic functions of government. The other part of government that's really important, besides protecting people from force and fraud, is the enforcement of contract law. And the only place that happens is in the civil courts. So I don't think there's a single citizen that can't say that they don't benefit from having the protection of that court system in one form or another. Whether it's a contract between a husband and wife that's dissolving and how you treat kids in that case, to whether or not somebody has used the force of armed robbery against you to take your property. I think the courthouse protects everybody. And I just want to say to Sandra, I really appreciate your testimony about prevention. I've spoken about the need to address homeless minors, because that's one of those prevention strategies. If we can deal with them and not let them be on the street for any length of time, there's a huge decrease in the chance they'll be chronically homeless as adults. So, those prevention strategies and going after and teaching good life skills to children, as we look at our community corrections system, and we're doing cognitive behavioral therapy with those folks and teaching them how to make good decisions, we should be doing that also with kids and a bunch of other people, because it's those life skills that will prevent some of the mistakes people make that get them into long-term issues such as drug addiction, or just entering into a life of crime where they end up with that felony record that makes it difficult to get housing. So there's all sorts of reasons to work on that prevention side. So I appreciate your testimony.
Okay. Anyone else wish to present any remonstrance or public response? Go ahead.
First off, and forgive me, this is said in light, but sometimes Commissioner Farr and I have so much in common. I just want to point out that I won the contest of who the last person to talk with Mr. Chris McAllister was, in that we had breakfast at the CASA meeting this morning.
I spoke to him before the meeting today. So.
He won. Damn. He did. You won. Okay. Seriously now. David, we are not one. We are one board, but we are 5 different individuals. And I also, like Commissioner Bozovich, will respond. And my response may be odd and seen as woo-woo, but it is my response. My service publicly is no different than my service for the first 65 years of my life, which were privately. And it is a love of people, and it is the desire wherever possible to mitigate unnecessary pain and suffering, and wherever possible to inspire people to have hope that they can in fact find a meaningful future for themselves. That is my response. I would like to just say that I personally take offense at whoever it was that talked about they understand our political game. Speaking only for myself, again, there is no game. There is no set of political calculations to determine what is the highest integrity decision or initiative or path that I can attempt to promote within this group of 5 people, all of whom I respect greatly. It's not a game at all. It's a desire to do the most that we can with what we have for the most people that touches lives. And finally, I would like to speak, is it Sandra? I would like to say that I agree with much of your analysis. In fact, I think that one of the most important things that we can do is identify where we are, where we're going, and how we get from here to there. And I think within that context, we have no direct authority over public education, but within that I have a career in public education too. Within that context, we do need to create education for a livable world. That means both the world and the skills and perspective and analysis that people bring to the table. I would suggest that, for whatever it's worth, a comprehensive plan to prevent homelessness is a comprehensive plan to create an economy that allows full and meaningful employment for all, that has policies that relate to housing for the least fortunate, that has meaningful I think, and then I'll stop my soliloquy here, I think that we all of us in this room, in the listening audience, and whether you're listening or not, are in the next decade seeing a transformation in society and the economy and what jobs are. And I think we're going to see through AI and technology that we are seeing it, the displacement of so many people. We're seeing remote purchasing. And so, I mean, think about it. So you got Walmarts and Targets now closing their least profitable stores. And where are the places where many people that need work and need products go to work and purchase? So we're in a big period of flux here. And I think homelessness is one of the most glaring and painful and difficult symptoms of that, for what it's worth. And so as we look at specific initiatives, those are the lenses at least I bring to it.
I also just wanted to reply to Ms. Erickson. I felt like what you say was really on spot for what we've been talking about regarding homelessness and housing here lately, and probably something we should have been talking about a long time ago. When people consider cutting social service programs, sometimes it can be very short-sighted. It has, in many cases, very long-term ramifications, as you've pointed out for San Francisco, and I'm sure many places throughout the country. And we constantly feel like we're putting Band-Aids on situations, excuse me, where we really want to be able to plug the hole and stop the inflow and be able to feel like we can tackle this thing. In many cases, it's much bigger than the county, much bigger than the state. It really needs everything from the top all the way down to really find a holistic solution that will stick. But of course, we're doing what we can. And right now it feels like Band-Aids, where we really, really do need to get down to core prevention strategies without removing social programs that are really helping the overall health and life of the people that live here. I don't know how to do that yet. I'm not sure anybody really knows how to do that yet. But if you've got ideas, please, please share. I mean, we can't pretend to be up here thinking we have all the answers. Clearly, nobody has all the answers. But if we put our minds together, we can figure it out. And I would really welcome conversation about some strategies that you may know that are helpful. thank you for coming, and thanks for other people who are speaking as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll just take a few moments in this meeting to give some comments about what we've heard a little bit in our public comment. The first thing is that I just want to thank everyone for coming, because it takes time to come to these meetings, and you have to find parking, you have to take time out of your schedule, and you have to sit here for quite a while until your time comes. And sometimes we've had to cut our time down because we just had too much more work to do. So thanks for coming. Secondly, being an elected official in a country which has a different kind of style of government. We have a republic, we have a constitution at our federal level, at our state level, and we are all taking an oath to uphold the state and federal constitution. And that is paramount over the rights that local governments and state governments and even Congress has to pass laws, and they have to be responsive to the public concerns. And one of the things I like about this, and I've worked at the federal government and state government and local government levels, is that it is a challenge. It is a challenge to try to get something done that helps people in that role, okay? But to me, it's just another way that people can help. So in my view, I'm trying to help people. That's how I get up in the morning. I say, can I help people today? But I recognize there are other ways that we can help in this society. I mean, certainly we all have stories of how the teacher helped us, or how the doctor helped us, or the nurse waiting to see the doctor. The nurse really helped us, or even kindness. I was a senator, and my car broke down, and a woman driving a pizza truck drove me in her pizza truck to the Oregon State Capitol so I could make a vote. And she did not know until we were approaching. She said, where are we going? I said, we're going to the state capitol. What do you do? Oh, I'm a senator. I work at the state. So the kindness of people who are in they're in private business. I said, I hope this doesn't cause you any stress in your job that you gave stranded motorists to drive a ride. So people can help in many, many, many ways, and I just have found this is a good way to try to help people. I did want to touch on this housing issue because, first of all, a number of you mentioned it in your public comment, and it is a really important issue our community faces. Our board has been very involved in several important features of maybe a solution. One is the TAC report and the implementation of the TAC report. The other is what we discussed last week here, and that is a contract that we're doing with Better Housing Together to, again, assess what the situation is. And part of that was a discussion of whether a housing bond would or would not be part of the solution. And I think it's fair to say that the bright people that are doing the Better Housing Together assessment, they will take their time on the assessment first before they jump into what the solutions are. They want to really assess the situation, and then they will consider some options. Personally, being a fairly long time follower and hopefully a few times a leader in this, I will say I think the federal contribution to solving housing problems is diminishing, and it's diminished over a series of presidencies and a series of Congresses. The state response has been a little more uplifting in my views, particularly this last session. They injected some money into the pipeline, and that'll help us. But I'm one that believes that good intentions are really not enough to solve problems. You need resources, you need plans, and you need strategies. And incidentally, thanks so much, Ms. Erickson, for your service, teaching, consumer affairs, because we do know that Americans waste a lot of money. We know they waste a lot of time, and sometimes consumer education can really make their dollars go much further if they know how to prepare food, if they know how to store food, if they know how to avoid being the victim of extensive advertising. I myself taught a class at the University of Oregon on consumer affairs, and I know that there's a lot of people out there that would really benefit from additional knowledge in their own life. But I don't think that the lack of funding in housing in the public sector for the role of the public sector in housing should ever be diminished. It's an elemental part of the civil rights movement in the United States to have housing as something we all believe is something that's valued. Sometimes people express that is in the phrase, there's a right to housing. Well, there's no constitutional right to housing, I can tell you that. But there's certainly a lot of people that believe it's really up there with an important right that they should have. So I'll just close by saying I think it's really great people came here today, and I want to echo what Commissioner Buck said about if people have good ideas, we certainly want their cards, letters, and more appropriate in this context, we want their emails, and we want their public comment and other ways that people can help contribute to solutions. So thank you.
Chair.
Yes, you want to have another round, Commissioner?
A quick point of information. Our Lane County Poverty and Homelessness Board has been in existence since 2015, and we have a strategic plan for that board, which is we have a working document which has the tactics under the plan. Our strategic plan has three areas of strategic focus. The second one is prevent homelessness and poverty, and the statement is prevention is at the center of all long-term poverty. And it goes on, this is all listed on Lane County's website under the Poverty and Homelessness Board, which details the elements that we have in our prevention program. However, Ms. Erickson, you point out some areas that we need to take a closer look at. So thank you very much for your testimony.
Are there other commissioners who want to make any further comments? I'll also add that we have a substantial amount, a number of people in this community that are trying to do what they can about the problems of unaffordable housing, preventing people from needing homelessness services, homeless people, lots of them. I'd invite you to look at the tape of our meeting last week where our housing people came in and talked about the number of homeless people and how they are being served or not in the community. We also have the Housing Policy Board. That's an intergovernmental agreement between Eugene and Springfield and Lane County. And Springfield has not been participating in the last few years, and Commissioner Burney has made it a big thing to really try to engage Springfield in the Housing Policy Board. The Homes for Good is a federally funded organization that provides low-income housing to people in Lane County. And 5 of the 7 commissioners of the Homes for Good Board are the elected Lane County commissioners. So we meet monthly as a Homes for Good board. We also have nonprofit organizations that are struggling mightily with increasing costs, tremendously increasing demands, and relatively stable resources. Well, what does that get you? More and more difficulty in trying to provide services. St. Vincent de Paul certainly is one of the leading organizations in the community, but there are many other nonprofits that are working to help people. So thank you for your willingness to try to help us and help the community do a better job. All right, we are ready. Oh, another round. Go ahead.
No. I'm completely out of order. I was going to move the consent calendar.
Okay, let's do that then. We're going to move to item 5. That's our consent calendar. If there's any, we consider these routine matters, but do any commissioners want to take something off the consent calendar? Okay, not seeing one, I'll turn to Commissioner Burney for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Thank you. I apologize, Mr. Chair.
Oh, you're getting it moving. That's good.
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Bernie, seconded by Commissioner Buck, to approve the consent calendar as presented. Are there any, we'll go straight to the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And the motion carries 5-0. All commissioners present and voting aye. All orders adopted unanimously. I think I'll turn to, go back to our adjustments to our agenda and call on Mr. Mokrajski to give some perspective on what you think the rest of the day is looking like.
Well, we have a 10 o'clock time certain. I certainly can do a few announcements until we get to that point. I don't believe County Council has the announcements, so we can do county administrator announcements and any board business before 10 o'clock, and then you have an 11 o'clock and a short item right after that.
Okay, well then why don't we?
Mr. Chair, there's no exec session today, and
Okay.
we should be able to wrap up before noon.
Okay.
Everything goes well.
Why don't we then go to item 9A, which is county administration announcements, and following that, we'll see what else we can do before our 10 o'clock time certain.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Good morning. I have a few items here, really all positive. I wanted to recognize today, October 1st, as the one-year anniversary of Lane County going tobacco-free on all of our campuses. So it's been 1 year, and really a rather smooth process. I, for one, have not received any major concerns or issues that have arisen from all of our campuses being tobacco-free. And a really positive note, when we reflect on all of our wellness efforts through our wellness clinic and our incentive-based programs for employees, we've seen 25 employees that have quit smoking. 25 of our employees have quit smoking in the course of the past year through our tobacco cessation programs offered through our wellness clinic and healthcare efforts. In addition, we recently had we do a number of these incentive programs for employees. One was recently is called Winning at Losing. So this was a weight loss challenge. 49 employees participated in that. 45% of those individuals lost weight, and it's a great way to sort of raise awareness about health and diet and exercise, and great participation there. So very pleased with our health and wellness efforts, and I just wanted to recognize again today and the board's leadership that you took in establishing all of our facilities as 100% tobacco-free. Last week, several departments in the county participated in United Way's annual Day of Caring event. This is a day of volunteering where various organizations in the community can put forward employees who will volunteer for different improvements in the community. There are 49 organizations, I think it's actually 47 organizations in the community that had employees that participated in the Day of Caring volunteer effort that benefited 49 nonprofit organizations. About 3,900 hours were donated from those folks, and nearly $100,000 in value from the volunteer hours. In Lane County, so those are community-wide, all the organizations that participated. In Lane County, we had our technology services, county administration, human resources, and financial services all participated volunteering for a portion of that day. And so I want to thank those who did that. And it's a great way, in addition to the work that our employees do every day, another nice way for both team building and contribution to positive things in the community. With that United Way theme, I wanted to also note that Kathy Howard, who is one of our Emerging Leaders graduates and an employee in Public Works Administration, she's been recently promoted into a new role in Public Works Administration. She is Lane County's loaned executive for United Way this year. So this is the third year in a row that we've had a loaned executive, an individual that we identify to help go and volunteer their time on behalf of Lane County. So they're compensated by Lane County, and they go and serve in that leadership role to help support nonprofit service organizations in the community. We're really excited about that, and we view it also as a wonderful leadership development tool for individuals in the organization who continue to aspire towards higher leadership. So thank you, Kathy, for stepping up and taking on that important role. I wanted to note that last week we had individuals speak today about a housing bond. As the board knows, we've referred that question of funding for affordable housing needs in the community to our work with Better Housing Together. Last week, our staff in Health and Human Services, myself, and our finance manager and budget manager, along with Karin Knutson, who's our consultant with Better Housing Together, met with 2 staff from Portland Metro. It was a wonderful conversation we had over about 2 hours to hear from them on their $652 million 3-county bond that they were successful in passing, I believe, last year in the Portland metro area. They spent several years developing that proposal, and we learned a lot from them in terms of what they did in coordinating with the counties and the cities, different structures of government there in the metro area, as well as the housing agencies, how they're utilizing those funds. They're actually in the process of beginning to construct, and they will be over a course of several years constructing up to 3,800 units of single family and individual affordable housing units. Again, $652 million, so a lot of resources that are being put towards that. But I just want to share that with the board, that we had a really great conversation with the team there to learn more, and we will, of course, will incorporate that into our work with Better Housing Together. I also last week, and it also was a great opportunity for us to connect with the North Willamette Valley partners. We've had this big gap, and last week on Wednesday, I presented at a conference, an Emerging Local Government Leaders Conference in Hillsborough. It was asked to go and speak about creating cultures of innovation, and so I was able to speak with staff from Hillsborough and Beaverton and Oregon City and Multnomah County and City of Portland, all Portland Metro folks. Built some really great contacts there. I took the opportunity to meet with the county or the city administrator, the chief administrator for the city of Portland, Tom Reinhardt, talk about their housing and homelessness initiatives and other efforts that they're working on. And then we had the Portland Metro folks in on Friday. So we're doing, just want to share that with the board, that in addition to collaborating with the counties that we tend to have a lot more in common with, Marion and Clackamas and Deschutes and Washington counties, we're also starting to build that relationship with the Portland Metro area. A brief election update I wanted to provide to commissioners. We do have an election here, and so November 5th is a special, November 5th, 2019 is a special election. It's not a full countywide election. It includes voters in the city of Eugene, Coburg, and the Santa Clara Police and Fire District. Approximately 123,000 registered voters will participate there. Out-of-country military ballots were mailed on September 20th to 480 eligible voters. Out-of-state ballots will be mailed on Monday, October 7th, and the remaining local, those are out-of-state ballots, and then the remaining local ballots delivered to the post office on October 17th. And then we're beginning to prepare for the May 19th, 2020 primary election. Candidate filings have begun for county offices, both North and South Commissioners and Sheriff, and all information and filing form links are available on our website at lanecounty.org/elections. That's it. One clarification I will offer to the commissioners. There was public comment last week, and Ms. Mann, I think, has left, but had emailed about a question about a grant received by the county from ICE, and we looked into that for the sheriff's office. There is no grant that was received. There actually was a purchase order where the agency had spent around $1,600 last year in use of the sheriff's range for training purposes. So I just wanted to clarify that, and I forwarded that email to the board with that information. That's all I have. Thanks. I know that was rather lengthy. I don't have anything else unless you have questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, I'll just jump to item 14A, and I'll just start off with a few commissioner announcements while we're awaiting our 10 a.m. time certain. And by the way, Ms. Ms. Ashbridge, if you want to come down here and get the PowerPoint set up for that, that would ease our technology jitters regarding our work session that we're having at 10 a.m. First announcement is that our board meeting will commence at 10:30 a.m. next week. So the board meeting will commence at 10:30 a.m. Also on October 15, we will, and December 17, we will have our board meetings, evening meetings. So those are set up as evening public comment sessions, and those are the remaining dates. Those are the only remaining dates of any evening public comment sessions. And at some point today, maybe, or next week, we'll talk about what the board wants to do, if anything, about scheduling any further evening public comment sessions. I know Commissioner Buck's put a lot of energy into what some options might be. With that, I think I'd like to ask our people to come up, get ready, and we'll take a recess until for 4 minutes, so we'll commence right at 10 o'clock. So we'll be in a recess for 4 minutes. Yes, sir.
How are you?
Good morning. This is the continuation of the Lane County Board of Commissioners meeting, and we are really happy that that we are having item 6A, which is a work session on the Spreading Kindness campaign. And we have Doug Carnine and Bruce Abel and others here, and I'm wondering if, which one of you wants to take the lead on this, okay? If you, Mr. Abel, would be willing to introduce everybody at the table and say a little bit about them, and then what I've been told is that the board allocated 20 minutes for the presentation, and hopefully the commissioners will be writing down their questions and comments, and then we will reserve about 40 minutes until the top of the hour for the commissioners to ask questions. Okay, so welcome.
Thank you for having us, commissioners. It's a real pleasure for us to be here today. My name is Bruce Abel, Doug Carnine, and David Funk. We're all members of the Spreading Kindness campaign, which has been present in Lane County for 2 years and doing some cool work, and Doug will talk about that in a few minutes. We're here today, and I appreciate it coming a little early and hearing you, why you want to be commissioners, and I think it's, for all of you, it's because you'd like to see our county flourish. For some of you, that's by supporting rights. For some of you, it's by supporting policies and actions that reduce suffering and find housing for people, or whatever it is that we can make differences with. So I was very excited to hear that. Really clear, we're not asking for any money. We are here because we believe, from our experience, that kindness makes a difference, and that it's not going to solve every problem, but it's a place to start, both as you look externally to the citizens of the county and internally to your own staff and policies and things. So that's our introduction. Doug is going to talk for a little bit.
So what is the basis for talking about kindness as being so important for individual and organizational health? There are hundreds of studies about this, but the best source is this new compilation in the book by psychiatrist Kelly Harding, The Rabbit Effect, Live Longer, Happier, and Healthier with the Groundbreaking Science of Kindness. There's no way to summarize this research in the short time I have, so instead I'll tell you a story. 50 years ago, my wife was taking an animal learning course by Professor Grice at the University of Illinois, where you'd run rats through mazes. And she and her partner had the rat that always won. It didn't matter what the schedule was. So nobody could figure that out. Well, 50 years later, this book comes along. And The Rabbit Effect, here's what it is. They were doing medical research where they were feeding rabbits high-fat diets to see what kind of cardiovascular problems were caused. There was a group of rabbits that had 60% fewer cardiovascular problems. So the lead scientist couldn't figure this out. So he searched and he searched and he searched, and he finally found out that the person handling those rabbits would talk to them, cuddle them, and hug them. And that's why they were 60% healthier. And what happened with my wife 50 years ago? She and her partner were the only women in the course. And what did they do with their rat? They hugged it, cuddled it, and talked to it. So kindness, that's the tip of the iceberg in terms of the power of kindness. Let's turn to the community. So,
and let me just interrupt you. Are you using the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Okay, and are you?
That's just the slide of the cover of the book.
Okay, very good. I just want to make sure your slides are keeping up with your presentation.
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you. So kindness in changing the culture of a community is critical and possible, but very difficult. In organizational change, researchers have found that when an organization tries to change its direction, the leaders under-message the change by a factor of 10. That's why change seldom happens. The power of change comes from messaging, messaging, messaging. And this was what we were told by Tom Tate, who's the national leader in Cities of Kindness, when he turned around the city of Anaheim. using kindness as his main driving force. And he's also going to be our keynote speaker at our event at the Shed on November 3rd. So, how do we message kindness in Eugene with the campaign? We want to make sure that kindness is seen, said, and spread. That's why we've given away 1,500 of those signs you see in front of me, so that everybody, it's hard to find somebody in Eugene, Springfield, who hasn't seen a sign somewhere. And we're giving, this past weekend, we probably gave away 150 at several different events. We work in every sector of the community, and by kindness, it's an intentional gesture or act of goodwill that promotes well-being or alleviates suffering. So the only way you can message enough is if you set it up so that kindness is seen, said, and spread in all the different sectors of your community. So, for example, every 4J school is putting in place a kindness plan as part of its school behavior plan. Congregations are having services about kindness. Last Sunday, First Congregational Church had a service about kindness, a sermon on kindness, children's artwork about kindness, and things of this sort. Last Thursday, I presented to 40 small business owners of the Springfield Greeters Club and talked to them about kindness training in the workplace. One of the members came up later and said he wants to go out and take the training out into the community because he feels it's so powerful and so important. But our purpose today here is not to talk about the campaign, but to go through what really is involved in the aspects of improving health at the individual level and at the organizational level for the county, because obviously we're here to talk about only those things that relate to the work of the county.
So last week there was the Mind Your Mind conference, and Dr. Pamela Peak found one of our signs, and in her keynote presentation, she incorporated spontaneously a lot of comments about kindness. She's an epigeneticist, which means that she looks at gene expression, and kindness and our behaviors are directly related to our health and well-being. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more, I think, our next. So as you think about the health benefits of kindness, why is that relevant to you all? Because you've got a huge public health department. You've got an FQHC. You support prevention and health promotion. In schools, they're taking their positive peer support activities and they're organizing that around kindness to reduce bullying and promote well-being in schools. We believe that you could focus more on prevention and well-being in your contracting for prevention by focusing on kindness. Health and wellness. We're going to see another slide really soon that kindness really increases health and wellness of individuals and communities. In your FQHCs, if the doctors said kindness is as important as not smoking, you have had employees who have lost weight and who have stopped smoking. That is great. The benefit of that is significant. The benefit of becoming kinder is more significant in promoting health. It is the only health promotion activity that is socially oriented, directed towards others and yourself, and not just your own ego struggling with losing weight or something. Dr. Ludke, your health officer, suggested to me that I suggest to you that in your health in all policies statement that you've developed, that you expand that to health and kindness in all policies, maybe in all contracts also, that it makes a statement that kindness is as important as anything else that you do. So this is a great little thing. You can't read it all, but it's a nationally published fact sheet on the benefits of health. And just to go to the next slide, it's going to summarize really quickly. Kindness increases your energy, your happiness quotient, your lifespan. There are chemicals that are released. It improves your social life. And it also decreases or increases your tolerance of pain or decreases your experience of pain and stress, anxiety, lowers your blood pressure, and reduces depression. So maybe when we get into the discussion phase, we could talk more about how you all could think about supporting your prevention programs, your clinics, your CCOs to support kindness, all of the nonprofits that you contract with. Just if each of them emphasizes kindness a little bit, it just shifts each of us 5%, 6, 8% towards kindness instead of selfishness and greed and polarized discussions. So anyway, that's that part. So this is going to be a little more uncomfortable for me. I told you all know that I worked here for a long time. I loved working.
Could you come up closer to the microphone so our tape catches your important words?
This next subject's a little more difficult because I was a county manager. I managed Trillium Behavioral Health. I loved my job. I loved my role. I loved the differences I could make. In preparing to meet with you all, we went and I in particular talked with a lot of people who work for the county now. High-level administrators, supervisors, and staff. And we talked to the union reps. Doug and I talked to Pat and Joe, and I think it was Laura Lee, although it's going to be. Your employees really like working here, and your employees feel that there is ongoing tension that's not being addressed between all levels of management and their workplaces. The union representatives are really open to changing the tenor of the dialogue. Right now, starting to meet and get prepared for the contract negotiations in January, building better communication. And when we said that we want to talk with them about kindness, they said, yeah, we'll meet with you. They met with us for a couple hours and really liked the notion of starting off any sort of employee union discussions from a point of kindness. When I talked to supervisors and I talked to line staff, it wasn't what I was looking for. I was just asking, what should we talk to you all about? What would be the most important things to address kindness? So but the internal stuff just kept coming up. So Doug is going to walk through a little bit because we've gone off and we've done trainings in the community on kindness in organizations. The chambers of commerce are really into it. The problems between your employees and between the employees of any business and management are really common. They're always there. So this is not a dumping on the county as a bad management. These are just inherent tensions. So Doug is going to, we've created just some information for you to think about that might demonstrate why kindness is relevant to changing an organization's culture.
So these findings are taken from articles in the Harvard Business Review, and the effects of training, according to this research analysis, is that it benefits the bottom line, customer satisfaction, employee engagement, and productivity. It increases employee motivation, relationships and creativity in attracting and retaining desirable employees, buffers against stress, and improves employee bounce back after adversity. And it allows people to value being in a kind workplace as being more important than just the material benefits. A large study in London with the health providers there, over 10,000 people, found that those that had a supportive supervisor had 50% less insurance claims. So a tremendous money savings for that health institution just by having a very supportive and kind supervisor.
Yeah, I wanted to add at this point, I'm not a member of the steering committee, but I was invited to attend a meeting of theirs one time by Bruce, and I attended in deference to Bruce, not because I thought, it seemed to me a very squishy sort of concept, the idea of being kind. I think all of us are naturally kind. We let cars in line, we hold doors open, and we do all of that. I had never looked at kindness as something that was a deliberate, functional part of a business. And I'd worked for 40 years with businesses, small family-owned businesses to Fortune 50 companies. And I had noticed over time, but never had identified it as kindness, what made the difference in company brands and company personalities. And then after I attended that meeting, I went back and thought about this, and as it turned out, a friend of mine who's in the same business came up from Los Angeles, and we got talking about the different personalities of companies that we had worked with over the years and organizations. He's worked a lot more with municipal and federal government organizations. I tended to work more with private businesses and public corporations. In any case, after this meeting I began to see that to look at kindness as a deliberate actions that companies made without even identifying it as kindness particularly. And I was privileged to be at the very top levels, the inside of companies, working with them on their brands. And more often than not, their branding had to do with internal communications and internal functioning than it did with external. Because the external was automatic. You could control your indirect and direct communications far more easily than you could your culture. And then I realized that the companies that were working the best, and especially companies that I'd worked with over many, many years, were the ones that were internally really kind to each other. It made a substantial difference. I just had never, until I went to their meeting, had never identified it as such. So I just want to attest to literally 40 years on the ground, witnessing the difference of a kindness in organizations, family feel. It makes a genuine, real, measurable difference.
So we're moving along here really quickly. I'm not going to take time to...
Of about 4 minutes,
okay.
roughly.
Thank you. This is what the research has found about 6 characteristics of a kind workplace. So this is what you want to work toward in the workplace to get the results that they found in this research synthesis. Here, how managers can support that type of culture. Increasing positive social connections, showing empathy, going out of the way to help, and encouraging people to talk, especially about their problems. This is an example, I don't expect you to read it, but we have training materials that are designed to help people in organizations develop the 6 characteristics of a kind organization and the 4 things managers can do to bring that about. And that's the kind of training. In fact, we're going to be meeting with the Captain Riley at the jail, who's interested in exploring the possibility of kindness training for jail corrections officers. Not kindness to offenders, but internal kindness to the organization to make a kind organization even kinder. So how can the county incorporate kindness into its workplaces? So this is a topic for discussion that we would like to participate in when the presentation ends. And so real quickly, we want to use kindness to reduce incivility and negative behaviors. 50% of the workforce experiences negative behavior and incivility at least once a week. Talking down to others, not listening, making demeaning remarks. The price of incivility, this is from a different Harvard Business Review article. These are the consequences of having an environment that is not civil and at times negative. Some companies estimate they lose $14,000 per year because of incivility. The solution, replace incivility and negative behavior with kindness. Kindness, see it, say it, spread it. Thank you.
So we have a couple final minutes. We would love it if you guys could endorse our...
Can you move forward to your microphone?
Sorry, we would love it if you guys could endorse the Spreading Kindness campaign, where we're really encouraging all cities or any city in Lane County to become a city of kindness. We believe that right now Eugene is planning to become a city of kindness. You could become a county of kindness, be one of the first in the country. And the benefit of that is you can talk about kindness and use your positional authority or power to just remind all of us on the benefits of having a kinder community. As we've looked to spread kindness, we are really fortunate to live in Lane County. We have a kind county programs and services, and we have rich with nonprofits that are supported by very generous and compassionate citizens. And we need to also hope that we can honor that and encourage it and support it. We had over 40 nonprofits sign on in support of the City of Kindness movement. We had schools join us. We had neighborhood associations join us. We had faith communities join us. And we go to the event. We're having an event on November 3rd. We have Mayor Tom Tate speaking. We would really like it if all of you would come. And the one, I heard you all have concerns about the unhoused people in our community. Community-supported shelters and David Hazen, who did the Emerald Compassionate Network, have created a breakout session on, I forget what the title is, but how to think about the unhoused people and change the dialect, change the words, the way we think about it. And it's not going to be looking at generating new resources. It's changing the story so we can be more sympathetic and compassionate to people that are homeless. We are also want to invite you to an event for civic leaders on November 4th from 10 to 11:30. 10:30 to 12 with Tom Tate and other community civic leaders, including politicians. Maybe the union reps have said that they would come, and school folks and just people from the community. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, and thanks so much for each of you for providing this background and education and all the volunteer energy you're putting into this effort. I'm sure the commissioners will have plenty of questions, and so I'll turn to Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I've been excited about this for a long time. Dr. Abel, when you and I first talked about it on the shores of Lake Louise, I was just telling Doug we first were sitting on the banks of Lake Louise talking, and you brought this up, and I thought, that's an interesting concept. And I realized that you weren't talking about a concept, you were talking about a state of being. And it really was evident how enthused you were about it. And at that point in time, you and I talked about how do we bring it to the county, and I made a mention of it probably the next week at the county level, and here we are several months later with a discussion at the board level on kindness. Oh my gosh, it's pretty exciting. You know, in my life, I realized this when I was sitting talking to you, Bruce, that kindness has been a large part of the successful organizations that I've been a part of. Most of my life, I worked either for my dad or for Jerry Orem. Same person in their heart, very kind people who would talk about how to please people, not how to cause people to do things. And you know, if you look at the organizations, my dad was a general manager of Tillamook Farmers Co-op, which is a very kind organization. I mean, it's taking care of dairy cattle. You've got to be kind. You've got to hug them. You got to talk to them, and they perform better. You know, and you play polka music to them in the morning. You know, it's all a part of farming. When I met Jerry Orem, he was the same way. And if you look at the organization that Jerry was the head of, it became from a tiny little hardware store to a very large, one of the largest in the world home improvement centers. And if you look internally, if you watch the way the employees behave to one another, the training programs were all based on kindness, catching people doing things right. There were four elements at Jerry's, four tenets, for what we call basic principles. The third one, the others I won't talk about, but the third one I'll talk about, 3 or 4, do favors gladly. And that is what Jerry's was all about. And it really became inherent I understood it because Jerry and my dad were the very same person. They caused people to do favors gladly. I'm not going to say very much because I'm really anxious to hear what other commissioners have to say about this. I am interested in Lane County becoming a county of kindness, just so that we can talk about it on a regular basis, not unlike we talk about a homelessness emergency on a regular basis, even though the statement is maybe symbolic. If you attach it to things that you actually do, then it's no longer symbolic. Then it becomes actually a way you do things. And I'm anxious to hear what other commissioners say. Thank you, David, Doug, Bruce, thank you for being here today.
Okay, other commissioners?
Thank you. So I appreciate the campaign and the studies behind it and the effort. You know, we may not have openly declared ourselves a kindness organization, but I would argue that we already are. You know, we've done a lot with our employees. I mean, you know, you spoke with 3 employees that really represent one particular union. In fact, one wasn't an employee. He's actually works for the union. So we have 6 other unions. We have 200 non-rep employees. That's not a statistically broad sample of our employee base. Our retention rates are higher than they've ever been. We just recently did some retention study work. We just finished interest-based bargaining with one of our units. And, you know, our employees are engaged, I think. You know, and we're doing all sorts of work that promotes kindness in multiple ways. We've won awards for being the healthiest public, one of the healthiest public employers in the state. And that's part of what we're doing, all sorts of engagement. In fact, Mind Your Mind is one of our wellness campaigns. So, I think without formally adopting, kindness in all policies, we're striving towards that anyways. As you look at our core behaviors that we're asking our employees, and trying to find solutions, connecting to people, those sort of things, the word kindness isn't there, but it's part of our organizational culture in many ways. That said, the one thing about throwing kindness in all policies gets to be kind of a conflict in some ways, because there are times when being kind to one person may not necessarily be kind to everyone involved, and understanding that there are those conflicts. Is it kind to arrest somebody? Does that arrest actually interrupt a cycle of addiction, maybe eventually lead to treatment and all that? And does it, save maybe 100 other people from being victimized by property crimes for feeding that addiction? Pretty kind to those future victims, probably. Not very kind to the person being arrested at the time. So, having that overall view of what's really kind to a person. Sometimes being tough with somebody's, now is kinder in the long run. We have to make some tough decisions up here, and we haven't had to make major cuts in a few years, fortunately. But I was here when we had to cut 20% of our budget, in a single year. And you have to make some very tough decisions that aren't very kind. We eliminated whole programs. The Phoenix program out at Serbu, gone. So there's, how kind was that to the kids that benefit from that treatment program? Not very kind. So we have to, all that balances. And I'll just throw in one last thing here. I actually have something that I wrote for my wife at one time, that selfishness is actually a virtue. So just throwing selfishness out there necessarily as an evil thing, I think is something we do as a society sometimes. It's not necessarily healthy, because we have to take care of ourselves before we can take care of others. And we have to have some inherent selflessness before we can actually exhibit kindness. You know, because if you're totally living for other people, you've basically given those people a lot of power over your life and enslaved yourself to them. So you have to have some inherent selflessness to be a healthy person. And then you can help other people be happy and healthy. But there is a certain amount of virtue to humanity to have some selfishness. The totally selfless person is not a happy person.
Okay. Other questions, comments from commissioners? Heather, very good. Commissioner Buck, then Commissioner Bernie, then me.
I appreciate the conversation and Commissioner Farr for making sure that you arrived today and are able to speak to us. I know that it was very supportive. As I'm listening to everybody speak here, I think of our national state of affairs and vitriol and angst and all of this that's happening that seeps down to the very local level quite quickly, it seems sometimes, and how we can do our part to try to bring that back up to a level where we can, you know, have kind conversations with each other, even though we may not necessarily agree on everything. And this seems like what, if not a wonderful way to try to bring that awareness back to our local community where we live across the street from each other and we don't necessarily know who lives there. And just being able to have better relationships in general where we're always on our computers and, you know, how do we engage properly with people is sometimes not even really taught to our children anymore. And when I think of where we can play a role in that as the county is, as you mentioned, for other internal companies, it's how do you mind your own house? You know, how do you care for the people that work for you and make that a reflection to the community and how we expect other community members to care for each other, speak to each other, work with each other. And I think that's where your, you know, campaign to have cities work on this consciously throughout their internal organization is so powerful and provides leadership to the community. We're still at a place where we have some relationships that still need mending, and we need to make sure that we pay attention to that and find ways in which we can meaningfully have those conversations and build our organization back to a place where we know that either kindness and other, you know, just a culture where we're open and can build on itself in rather than in a negative cycle that can cycle down really quickly. It always takes a long time to cycle back up to a positive place. So, you know, that's what's going through my mind as you were presenting and talking. I really appreciate your perspective, Mr. Funk, on, you know, what it looks like from different companies and how they manage that and how some people just manage that much better than others. And what do we as a community, and us particularly at the county, how do we want that reflection to our community to be? So I appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
I spoke with Stan Payne for an hour, and he was very kind to me. And he told me that I exhibited more, I'm not saying, he said this, not me, all of these traits more than most people he's met. So forgive me, because I am not supportive of this. And I want to explain why and just share my truth. And I may be the most unpopular person up here for doing it, but I do.
We'll be kind in response.
Jay might not be able to say. One, I think of all animals to talk about paralleling kindness and cuddling with rabbits who seem to multiply just fine on their own. I hope that doesn't increase our rabbit population. Up until 2 years ago, I worked in Anaheim, among other cities, in Orange County and Los Angeles County, and that city is no more or less kind and is no more or less turned around than other communities in that area, at least from the vantage point that I worked in, which was with nonprofits, with labor organizations, with finance group, with the city government agencies, et cetera. I personally think I've heard a message of messaging and branding, which sounds kind of corporate, which is, I have no doubt of your positive intentions, but it feels to me that that's what you're kind of doing. We could be having discussions of campaigns on integrity, compassion, empathy, joy, thoughtfulness, hope, usefulness, et cetera, et cetera. So in a sense, in a democracy where we have to keep our eye on the prize, for me and only me, and I'm not arguing this with any vitriol, this is a distraction. I would much more be interested in, for example, negotiating contracts that don't say be kind, but say we will pay living wages. We will allow for flexible schedules. We will source purchasing and hiring locally. We will give hope to local people. We will decrease carbon emissions in our environment. We will increase clean energy. That to me is kind and can be measured. This morning I was at a CASA, Court-Appointed Special Advocate breakfast. The kindest thing some people could do is volunteer to be a CASA, not necessarily spend their time going to conferences or meetings or discussions or taking time about discussing a positive attribute like kindness, which weaves through all of our humanity, but by doing things that help people because there is so much need out there. In my opinion, rather than talk about kindness, I think the kindest thing we can do is deal with real issues like child pornography, white nationalism, political correctness, deforestation, war, climate, healthcare, mental health care, gun violence, institutionalized racism, housing needs, sex trafficking, opioid addiction. The list goes on and on and on. There is so much that we as a public body need to provide resources for or figure solutions to. That this seems quite abstract to me. I think the word kindness is catchy and feel good, but in public arenas dealing with these kinds of important issues I mentioned, and these are, I might add, on the taxpayer dime, might be civility and just behaving as an adult. This is what it's taught and expected and reinforced in the classroom from a young age. The connotations of kindness for me also bring up concepts like morality and ethics and righteousness, and can become problematic, as Commissioner Bozovich mentioned, when you have to make judgments in the discourse of the public arena. I don't know why other public bodies are so easily just making a thing. I think we should have a world of kindness. I think we should have a country of kindness, a state of kindness. But that doesn't have anything to do with, for me, a campaign for kindness. The last, by the way, forgive me, Sunday I was at Willamalene's 75th annual birthday celebration, and there were several Choose Kindness signs, and as I was driving in, several children were spitting on and fighting with each other and knocked down one of those signs. I'm more interested in the behavior than the signs, personally. So I think it's a slippery slope. I think it can get out of hand. I think some people don't interact as amiably or quote-unquote kindly as others. I don't believe that that implies incompetence, ill intent, or that they really need to alter their personality. I think we all interact with others in different ways, and that is what makes us human. So another concern is when we brand something kindness, that means some things aren't kind. And if kindness is insisted as a standard for discourse, might it lead to suppression of speech and valuable ideas? If someone becomes uncomfortable in the face of straightforward questioning about the content of discussion or during a criticism, valid criticism, like I'm sure I'm going to get about my opinion, simply labeling the dialogue as unkind might block the airing of information. So, for me, and I'm sorry, taking a long time, but for me, I personally don't believe I need a campaign for kindness. I believe now and then I should reread everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten, and I'm going to give you a few of those points. 1, share everything. 2, play fair. 3, don't hit people. 4, put things back where you found them. 5, clean up your own mess. 6, don't take things that aren't yours. 7, say you're sorry when you hurt somebody. 8, wash your hands before you eat, etc., etc., etc. So that is my feeling. I don't want to go down that slippery slope, and it has absolutely nothing with my not embodying and embracing being kind in every moment and every activity of my life or every input I have on this board.
Thank you very much. I wanted to say a few things myself. The first of all is I can't believe I am sitting here with David Funk presenting to the Board of County Commissioners. This is the David Funk of Bell and Funk, Funk Levis, and possibly Funk and Wagnalls. That is how famous this business guy is in our community. So seriously, I think it's really important that we recognize that people come to this concept of the kindness movement from different perspectives. And let me give you a couple that I come from. First is I kind of like kind County Lane. I like Lane County kind. I like kindness Lane County, and I like Lane County kindness. So, but I'll leave it to the branding experts to try to figure out how to get the name of the community, put the kindness in there. Secondly, I like the emphasis on the deliverables, as we say in the private sector. When I first heard about this and thought about this, I kind of had a lot of what Commissioner Berney expressed in terms of being trivializing it. And I like the way you cited the Harvard Business Review. I am not going to be able to cite the Harvard Business Review in my comments, but I think I'm going to tell a couple of things that might illustrate my own interest. And ironically, this comes from Commissioner Farr and I have the shared experience of actually working around dairy cows. And my first example is my grandfather had a dairy farm, and we had to milk these cows at 3:45 a.m. and 3:45 p.m. And my cousin, who was mainly the kid on the farm that really knew about the farming, I'm just the city kid that comes to work on the farm once in the summer, we like to play loud rock and roll music early in the morning when the uncle and grandpa weren't around. But they got up a little later than us. We started the milking. And so we had played this loud rock and roll music. And of course, I won't give you the full explanation of what was said by our elders, but they then replaced that with Vivaldi. Dairy cows, 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:15 in the morning, hearing Vivaldi. And it is true. Okay, I'm giving you, what do they call it in science? I'm giving you the clinical evidence, not the peer reviewed evidence, but the clinical evidence is that if you're nicer, kinder to dairy cows, and sometimes you have to direct dairy cows to where they're needed to go, and it may not appear to those who have not ever dealt with a dairy cow that you're not being kind, but you are doing it the best you can to achieve the goal, which is greater production. And the cow will give more milk. In fact, Carnation had a slogan, and they were kind of our corporate opponents, but it was like, contented cows. That was their motto. Okay, my second example is, I think their slogan was, contented cows give more milk. I think that was the Carnation motto. The second example I'm going to give is from the boot camp. Now, just the word boot camp might inspire sort of not so kind environment, but I learned when I was on the Senate Judiciary Committee that there were actually two types of boot camps. One might call it the soft boot camp, and the other might call it the hard boot camp. The hard boot camp was you throw the inmate into and I mean literally, you throw the inmate into a van and you drive them without the benefit of a seatbelt from whatever jail they're in to the prison. And you yell at them and take sticks and encourage them to go to wherever they're going, and you continually treat them in a sort of subhuman way and yell and scream at them. And the outcome of that boot camp was really no different than the outcome from the prison. Okay, but Oregon adopted a different type of boot camp, what I might call a soft boot camp, wherein the officers gently escorted the inmates from the comfort of their shackles and their seatbelt into the boot camp. Then they were given uniforms, including ties and white shirts, and they were told to call the corrections officers sir, and they were told, the corrections officers were supposed to call the inmates by their title, Mr. Jones, Mr. Smith, whatever. Okay, at first, when I first heard about this, I go, oh, taxpayers are never going to support this. This is like coddling people, right? This is too soft. But not the truth is that they have half of the day devoted to education and half of the day devoted to work. And the outcome, again, this is clinical. I'll say there are some reviewed science on this, but the clinical is, this is how I decided as a visitor, right? I'm a senator, I go to the boot camp, and I want to ask one of the corrections officers, so what is it like working in the boot camp compared to the general population? He says, well, let me tell you this, I've worked all over the state of Oregon, and I've worked in 5 different prisons, and this is what I'll tell you. The first time, this is the first time it's happened to me. It's happened to me 3 times at the boot camp. And I said, what's that? And he says, I went on vacation. When I got back from vacation, one of the inmates said, hey, how was your vacation? We missed you. Now, again, that is clinical. That's anecdotal. So and by the way, in terms of comparisons of the so-called soft boot camp versus the hard boot camp, nationwide, the non-Georgia style, they actually, in the literature, they refer to it as the Georgia style boot camp, they have a higher failure rate and a lower success rate than the other boot camps. So to me, that made some difference. Now, I want to dig into, and this is going to be my question, I want to dig into those Harvard Law Review things. I want you to talk a little bit more because, maybe kind of semi-interesting to hear my boot camp story or my dairy cow story, but I am interested in, let's say, more scientific validity, and I'm quite, still retain a great deal of the concern that Commissioner Bernie expressed. I wouldn't say I totally agree with him, but I agree with a lot of the potential for trivializing this. I mean, we have a rather unkind president that, in my view, needs to be impeached as kindly and as quickly as possible, but still impeached. Now, it's just a personal view. And I don't know when you get into the harshness of war and of making decisions in a democratic society, how you can justify that against kindness, but I think I can. I think I can rationalize and go, I really don't like it when President Trump bullies people and calls, CIA officers as being unpatriotic or whatever. I don't like that. I don't like when the First Lady wears a coat to an event where there's been a tragedy and she wears a coat that says, "I don't care." I mean, to me, that's not kind. And it also, as Commissioner Berney pointed out, is taking us away. Right? The minutes we spend up here to talk about kindness, we're not talking about climate change. We're not talking about housing. We're not talking about tax reform. We're not trying to, so I do carry some of that. But the reason I'm going to ask you the question about the statistics, and I've given you enough warning that I was going to ask you, that I want to hear as best as you can, the peer-reviewed, the sort of the truth, not the anecdotes that you heard from commissioners, but the truth of why business and why creative institutions that are doing this are doing it other than to have a feel-good. So I want to hear that.
It's a peer-reviewed journal, so I'm assuming with its stature that the statistics and the basis are legitimate. I want to answer in a slightly different way. In our breakout November 4th, one of our sections is on businesses. And one of our speakers is Mike Nesbitt, CEO of Papa's Pizza. And he's going to talk about mentoring youth in their first job. He's done tremendous work. Casey Roscoe, Vice President of Seneca, is going to talk. She's going to tell the story about when there was a recession on the West Coast, the big recession. Theirs was the only mill that did not lay off anyone, the entire West Coast, of all the mills on the West Coast. That's internal kindness. Mike Nesbitt, mentoring youth, that's internal kindness. We're going to have Palo Alto Software talk about internal kindness. The purpose of talking about kindness is to see if it will create more empathy in people, and if they have more empathy, then they will care about things like sex trafficking, a living wage, and things of this sort. We have to touch people's hearts so that we're dealing with these taxes, all kinds of very important issues. But if you don't change people's hearts and open them up to why it matters, then we're going to continue to be at loggerheads. One of the things we did in the campaign was we brought 6 reds and 6 blues together. And two of the reds were members of the executive committee for the Republican Party. And what did we find? We found that if we talk about families and children, we come in strong agreement and we can feel we're part of a community. So the purpose of kindness is not to distract us, it's to touch the hearts of people so the real issues can be addressed in a constructive fashion. The limits of kindness, one of the examples I use of kindness is the Vietnamese monk who burned himself alive. Why is that kind? Probably shortened the Vietnamese War and saved thousands of lives. When we do the training, one of the things we bring up is the doormat. That's the person who does everything for somebody else and doesn't take care of their own work. And as some of you have pointed out, they are the least happy. They're the failures. Kindness has to have limits. You're going to make hard decisions. And there are trade-offs. But the mindset is like the soft and hard boot camp. Yeah, they need to go to prison. One of the books I've written, 3 of my co-authors are murderers. If you're familiar with the book Brubaker about the super horrible prison in Arkansas where they found 200 people buried in the grounds with unmarked graves and the torture telephone, those are my co-authors. That's the prison they're in. And what do? We work on kindness. One of these men murdered his parents, but kindness has turned his life around. It's not trivial. It's something that touches people's hearts and then it changes their minds about issues.
And one comment I would like to make is that kindness is not just attitudinal. A kindness is an action. It's an action that reduces the suffering of someone or promotes their well-being. It doesn't need to be a selfless act, but but it's action and doing something in whatever situation that it's brought to.
Okay. We have a few minutes left in our hour. If any other commissioners want to make any other final comments, go ahead, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, and I'll be brief because we have 5 minutes and 5 commissioners. So, you know, you've heard some of the structure involved in the work that we do, all of which really ultimately should be and is reflecting kindness, because we are doing the will of the people who have elected us, but we are doing it beyond just an election. We're doing it in ways that make the best use of our resources and help people the most, leveraging the things that we have to do more for people, which is an ultimate act of kindness. You know, there's one statement from The Art of War. Now, we've all read The Art of War. We all know the 31 tenets of The Art of War. The statement that I love, where the author talks about winning battles and how you win battles, he also says, treat your enemy as your beloved son. And really, that is regarding kindness. And he adds, build them a golden bridge to retreat across. So, you know, so it's really the kindness that I personally am talking about fits into the structure of being a county commissioner or being a city councilor or being a state legislator. It fits into that structure because the things that we do reflect the law and reflect, in many times, harsh responses. But the feeling of kindness, the feeling of empathy really supersedes all of that. And to me, the interpersonal relationship you develop with people when you are kind to them, whether you agree or not on motives and principles and outcomes. Kindness is something that you do in conversation, and you do in a way that really it encompasses the spirit of working together. So I'm glad you're here. I'm really, really glad you're here. And kindness, once again, is something that I'm highly interested in, and the County of Kindness is something I would like to pursue. Thank you.
Any other comments? Commissioner Bozovich, Commissioner Berney?
I'm trying to just be real quick and say I really appreciate Commissioner Berney's comments because I too have a fair amount of skepticism, and most of it's based on just having policy that uses unmeasurable terms. You know, one of the things I've railed on in past is the quote, war on something, you know, where you can't say, have we gotten there? You know, war on poverty, war on drugs, war on hate, you know, these unmeasurable terms, you know, choose kindness. You know, how do we know when we've achieved that? And what happens when you have policy on unmeasurable stuff is you can dump unimaginable amount of resources and really not achieve anything because you're not really measuring a result. And I can't imagine how much we've dumped into some of those other things like the war on drugs. And have we actually achieved something? So that's one of my concerns about this is now we're going to, you know, do a choose kindness. How much resource is going to be diverted from more meaningful efforts to work on something we can't measure whether we've achieved, even though I've also talked about how much we're already doing that kind of demonstrates that kindness in our organization.
Okay. Yep.
So I would just like to clarify, and Mr. Funk, we have met a few times, but we haven't really had the opportunity to talk. I dealt with your partner, actually, just in the process of getting here. And I want to be kind to staff because there's hundreds of people watching this to make sure they get in the queue at the right time and follow up the work that occurs from this. I would like to just differentiate. One could not be more committed to acts of kindness than myself. My objection was not to that. And if your efforts honestly do create more of that, more power to you. My objection is in looking at the implications and creating another structure And you're not asking us for money, but I've been to the website, and it not only sells merchandise, but it does ask for donations. So this is becoming, my objection is another thing being created that can draw time and resources away from the very things it's promoting, which is what I was trying to say earlier. I just wanted to make that distinction. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you so much to all of you and all the work you put into this and the excellent presentation today. I just had one final comment. You know, that great movie about Gandhi, where the world's largest naval power, the world's largest army at the time, they're in this phenomenal palace, and the viceroy, the British viceroy, is gathered around the table with all these important people, the generals and admirals and officials of the British, hierarchy in India, and the Indian people, many of whom wanted to get a violent revolution to throw the British out of India. And Gandhi comes into the room, and he says, we would like you to leave. And one of the generals says, in a kind of a British accent, which I can't do, so I won't, but he says, thank you, I'll be kind. I can. Mr. Gandhi, he doesn't name Mr. Gandhi. Mr. Gandhi, do you just expect us to get up and walk out of India? And Mr. Gandhi says, yes. And that's exactly what you're going to do. And it happened. It happened. To me, that's an illustration of what the power of this can be. So thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll all be in touch. And Mr. Funk, you can work on some of the branding that I started there. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So we're going to ask our friends that are coming up at 11 to join us at the table. And while they're doing that, I'm going to read the agenda item, and that is item 7A, update on the homeless and supportive housing system report recommendation, TAC implementation, and the Eugene mission presentation. With us to discuss this would be Steve Manella, Lane County Human Services Division Manager, Bob Sorentz. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You did, thank you.
Very good.
We met you last week.
Well, we met you last week. Bob Sorentz, who is Lane County Human Services Supervisor, and Cheryl Balthrop. Are you here? Okay, come on up. Come on down. Ms. Balthrop is Executive Director of the Eugene Mission. Before I call on Mr. Manella to introduce this topic, I'd like to recognize Commissioner Buck before we jump into this.
I just wanted to make sure that as we move forward regarding the TAC report in the next item after that, I declare my potential conflict of interest. I know that you're probably looking for direction, and since we're talking about TAC report and implementation and social services, I just wanted to make sure that I declared that I am related to the Executive Director of St. Vincent de Paul, and I don't think this is an actual conflict of interest. So I will remain part of the conversation. I just wanted to make sure that that was out there.
Thank you, Commissioner, for getting that on the record. So, Mr. Manella, do you want to introduce people and give us an overview? My understanding is we had set this up as a 30-minute briefing with some responses from commissioners for about 20 minutes.
Yes.
Okay, welcome.
Commissioner Sorensen, Board of Commissioners, it's my pleasure this morning to introduce to you folks who are going to speak to you about the Technical Assistance Collaborative recommendations and our implementation of those for emergency shelter and systems change in our homeless system. So on my left is Bob Sorentz, who you got the pleasure of meeting last week when we presented on the winter strategies, Cheryl Bothrop from the Eugene Mission, who is a partner with us as a private sector representative in our continuum of care. In the fall of 2007, the Poverty and Homelessness Board and the city and the county came together, and there was a lot of energy around the need to create emergency shelter and create a situation in our communities in Lane County where anybody who wants to be indoors or sheltered can be indoors. A recognition that we have many of our residents who are unhoused, and their circumstances are as complex as our society. With that, we enlisted the help of the Technical Assistance Collaborative. We had input sessions with people with lived experience, with social service providers, with elected officials, surveys, and out of that came a recommendation that has 10 elements to it, and Bob is going to go through those. The last time we had a presentation on TAC was the joint elected officials meeting in January 22nd, 2019. And so what we want to do today is we want to give you a glimpse at all the activity that's occurred. In fact, the week after that presentation, we formed a core group between city and county staff and commenced with weekly coordination meetings. And that team includes Greg Rickoff, who's our Lane County Director of Operations, Karen Gaffney, the Director of Health and Human Services, Christy Hammett, the Assistant City Manager, myself, Becky DeWitt from the City of Eugene, who manages the City Manager's Office, and she's here in the audience today. And then Bob joined us in July with his hire. So we have covered a lot of territory, the group of us who have been meeting, everything from looking at recommendations for what an emergency shelter could look like, discussion of sprung structures, discussion of sites. It is a weekly meeting where we can inform one another of what we're doing. For the City of Eugene, to give you a glimpse into the city is, they have a parks department that is often impacted, by people who are camping in the parks. So there are issues around that. There are issues, for the police department and public safety and how best to respond. So I'm just giving you a flavor of the gamut of topics we discuss. One of the big items that we as county folks have brought to the table is the intersection between mental health, public safety, and housing. And so that continues to be an area of interest for us all. So currently, some of the activities that are happening is that, and Bob's going to go into this in more detail, and then Karen's going to talk about the intergovernmental agreement with the city. But one of the positions that the city and the county is looking at jointly funding is, it's been called the SIM, systems integration manager. We're looking for a better title for that, and we're working with an executive search group that can help us. We're looking at permanent supportive housing opportunities. There are sites that are available within the city of Eugene and within the county that we've been looking at in relationship to the goal of creating 350 units of permanent supportive housing. And then finally, we've had a subgroup that has been working on communications, because it's very important that we inform the community about what we are doing, because this is not only a technical effort of staff and of housing and social service providers, but this is something that requires volunteerism, commitment from members of the community, much of which is occurring within our nonprofit community, other efforts that we'll need to tap into in order to achieve our goals.
This is a graphic that shows the 10 recommendations. I'm told, have seen the report and have had several briefings on this. What we're going to describe for you is efforts that we've made significant efforts in 6 of these areas, and 4 areas that we're still needing to develop plans and continue our progress. So the first is expand and coordinate street outreach. One of the things the TAC recommendation demonstrated was that although we do have outreach teams and outreach programs, that work is often not very coordinated, and it's siloed based upon the programs that the particular agency or project may fund. So there is this sense that in order to move our work forward, that there is a deeper work that needs to be done in coordinating our efforts. One of the best practices approaches is the concept of barrier busters, and you've probably heard of that term. And basically, it's flexible funding that allows a person that we've identified who is ready for permanent supportive housing, but maybe they don't have funds for to get their birth certificate or an ID card from the Department of Motor Vehicles. So these are funds that are flexible and allows outreach workers to help move people along. In 2019, this summer, the City of Eugene allocated $200,000 as part of a larger package, and this $200,000 would help to pilot a mobile street team that consolidates outreach and diversion and navigation services. And in August, the City of Eugene has been engaging people with lived experience to get their input on what would need to be crucial elements for a mobile outreach model. And then our goal is in 2020 to pursue funding that will enable us to hire an outreach coordinator at the county level to help us manage a very complex system of outreach in terms of identifying hotspots, populations, so that our work can move forward in outreach. Another area where we've had significant progress is related to permanent supportive housing. And as you know, the goal, according to the TAC recommendations, was 350 units. So how do we get there? As Steve mentioned earlier, Steve Manella mentioned, we are engaged in this process to seek this entity, a professional or a firm that would help us to develop permanent supportive housing and a new public shelter. This last month, Lane County and Homes for Good have applied for to be a part of a technical assistance cohort. They'll work with a team of individuals who will receive specialized training, and also that will help us after we have identified a site that is viable for permanent supportive housing, to also be eligible for additional funding for that site. And we have just begun work to identify in the county and in the City of Eugene actual parcels, locations where we may be able to site these units. You'll also hear from our director, Karen Gaffney, about this intergovernmental agreement between the City of Eugene and Lane County to how do we implement these recommendations. And then we're looking forward next month to groundbreaking at the MLK Commons site, and this will bring to us 51 supportive housing, permanent supportive housing units. That's an exciting opportunity. Another area we've made progress is on what we call move-on strategies. There are individuals who have had assistance for some time in a permanent supportive housing unit, and they've reached the place where they no longer need the supportive part of that package, and they, on their own, through their own development, they could thrive, but they don't need the additional expense. So the move-on strategy identifies those individuals who they may need a further rental subsidy, and we have been able to develop an MOU with Homes for Good, our housing authority, to prioritize through our continuum of care local projects these individuals who are ready to have a voucher. And that would open up an opportunity for someone else who has been identified through our coordinated entry process, this ability to get off the street and occupy one of those units. Another area that we have progress is in terms of the effectiveness of coordinated entry. And one of the key pieces to drive coordinated entry, we need to get down to that person, that by name list. And with a team of organizations that work with that individual, be able to do that very in the weeds case coordination. And so with our staff and our providers, we've begun to do that more in-depth work with a program also called Fuse, and with folks who do the outreach in our continuum of care system. We began recruitment in July to add additional outreach workers. What happens is a person may be identified, but because of their status of being unhoused, we actually have to do some sleuthing to figure out where are they now, and how do we get them connected to the appropriate resource. So outreach workers will work with a specific short list of individuals to tie them to that resource. And then we are also in the midst of a recruitment. We're about ready to complete that for an administrative analyst. All this work in the front end with the boots on the ground. It also requires people on the back end, folks who have that analytical and technical expertise to help move our system forward in terms of policy development, et cetera. And so this helps us develop that capacity on the back end. Another thing that we have identified in terms of a need to improve our system is training. And one of the areas that I'm very familiar with in my work in previous communities is the assistance that's needed to manage our homeless management information system. And what that means is there's a lot of individuals, some 200 individuals who have a license to take in folks who have been identified, create that client profile, manage that information on a person-by-person basis, and also the complex policies that are driven primarily through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And not only that, getting that system, the information and getting that system out, which is what you all need to see. You all need to see those reports and that depiction of what's the progress being made. So it's critical that we have sufficient training, and that is in my estimation, and the report also demonstrated, a huge gap. We have agencies that can increase their own capacity to get that information out, as well as having good quality data going in. So we need to train folks in our homeless management information system, and we actually have a new system, somewhat new, in that our previous iterations were actually managed by the Portland Homeless Information System structure. So now we have our own Lane County implementation that became live today. Yes. And so we have staff who worked late into the hours last night doing the final touches on that. And so we're really excited about that system. And what that does, it gives us more flexibility, more functionality that we didn't have before, since we were the daughter in a relationship with Portland. And then we'll be attending, staff from the city of Eugene, from Lane County, and Kaiser Permanente will be attending a training later this month in Denver. It's called Built for Zero. How do we move our community in terms of getting to that, what some call that functional zero, a very controversial in some ways metric, but one that identifies specific populations where we can get to the place where Steve mentioned, where those who are ready and want a space, we can get them into housing and off the street. We also convened a group of our providers last week in terms of developing consensus around what we're doing and how we get that work done in terms of addressing homelessness, and what are the underlying principles that we need to share in order to move that vision forward. And then last, we've made some progress on expanding the shelter and increasing utilization. The city of Eugene this last summer, they allocated $1 million for a new public shelter. And we have received reports from our emergency shelters, including the Mission and our Dusk to Dawn alternative shelter, that we have had several points in this last summer where we've reached 100% capacity, and in some cases have waiting lists. There are areas where we need continued development, and you can see those 4 areas that we've listed. We do have an opportunity, and many of you, if your staff have been able to get through all your emails, you might have seen this. Invitation. We're inviting a broad group of stakeholders. I've had conversations with the Chamber of Commerce representatives and with business representatives to join us for 2 days, as well as service providers, people with lived experience, county staff. And we're going to talk about together, what is this vision? What are the common values we have? What is our understanding of the root causes of homelessness? And in our community, how do we together come up with a unified vision that brings oftentimes contentious voices to the place where we can say, yes, we have our differences, but also we have common ground, and how we're going to move forward. So you've been invited, that as well as other local officials, elected officials in the community, to come and join us to engage in that conversation. And I think that's the conclusion of my report.
So with that, it's my pleasure to have Cheryl Bathrop from the Eugene Mission present on their program and some of the visions and change that they're involved in better meeting the needs of members of our community.
Thank you. Commissioner Sorensen, commissioners, staff, I appreciate this opportunity to share our vision and perhaps a slightly different perspective. And I want to start off by saying what a pleasure it has been to collaborate with staff and to see this renewed interest and extraordinary level of collaboration. But I do want to let you all know that we do have a slightly different perspective, so we're not all speaking with one unified voice. When I assumed this position and started to consider the various solutions set forth for homelessness, I kept having the quote from H.L. Mencken come to mind, that for every complex problem, there's an answer that is clear, simple, and wrong. You know, the issues relating to chronic homelessness are complex. The problems are multi-generational and involve multiple co-occurring problems such as mental illness, drug addiction, trauma, domestic violence, broken families. You all know this. We all know this. And so we can't just boil it down to one issue. And the most valuable recommendation that I see when I look at the various TAC recommendations is the need for a menu of solutions, and how important it is that we implement a menu of solutions to assist our vulnerable neighbors on the street. There is no silver bullet, and there is not something that's just going to resolve the problem in short order. I think we need to share that message plainly and truthfully to our community and not create expectations that can't be fulfilled. While the housing solution tracks the federal policy programs and the available funds, I still don't think that is the clear and simple solution either. It falls a little bit short in addressing the bigger upstream problems that led our precious neighbors to suffer being chronically unhoused in the first place. And again, we need to recognize as leaders in this community that if these problems are left unaddressed, these problems will ultimately cause that person to return to homelessness or to decline further in overall wellness, which is just as much as a humanitarian and community crisis, though maybe not quite so visible. Just because we put that person somewhere does not mean those problems just go away. We need to retain our commitment to that overall well-being of that person and look to the mental health, the addiction recovery, all the other supports, the tenancy supports that must remain in place. And there's an incredible urgency here. We're looking at a time frame. We all know how long these things take, but I can tell you in our collaboration with our community partners, with lived experience individuals such as Chris McAllister in the audience, we see that the urgency is now to address these problems, and many of these individuals don't have years. The problem that we see with 60-plus years of frontline experience as the Eugene Mission is actually, it's not so much housing as it is disconnection. And it's not some sort of woo-woo concept. The disconnection across a broad variety of areas of impoverishment, the disconnection from physical and mental health. Again, I'm going to list these. These seem obvious, but we seem to keep forgetting them. Our precious individuals on the streets are suffering disconnection from physical and mental health, from health, family, friends, education and vocational opportunities, life skills, basic behavioral supports. They may not have had the training or the competencies, addiction recovery. We know that this community is sorely lacking in addiction recovery supports. Without those services in place, the housing is only just a drop in the bucket. And we know that this disconnection from wellness leads to an existential breakdown in the person's life and isolation from and damage to the community. So what is the Eugene Mission doing about it? We realize that we can no longer function just as a crisis shelter. We are committed to doing so much more for these precious individuals, to not abandon our role as a crisis shelter, but also to recognize that we need to play a role in this community to provide those transitional services as well. And we also recognize that we have this extraordinary blessing to provide services that aren't going to be reimbursed by our community partners. The types of services that we consider to be relational. So we see that our guests need to have that one-on-one personal connection in order to even have the trust, in order to start addressing those various impoverishment areas. And many times this type of relational connection is not possible in a therapeutic or professional or fee-for-service environment. You know that you cannot spend the type of time that's needed to share a meal with someone or to connect with someone when the clock is running. I know that from my life in the past, and I know that when resources are so stretched and you only have X amount of time, you cannot really get to know that person. And our guests feel that too. When services are delivered in a transactional manner, they are not getting the relational connection that they need. But here we are with this campus with hundreds and hundreds of heart-level service volunteers who are desperate to start serving their fellow neighbors, who want to start connecting with people on a relational basis. And again, coming back to that connection piece, which I said wasn't woo-woo, we are saying that we are a vital piece to filling in some of the gaps that the TAC can't possibly address. And that is providing this relational basis for the overlay of these other services. So let me move on to the next piece. We believe that our campus should serve as like a safe home base for the provision of services. Instead of these vulnerable individuals having to navigate our community, we think the community should come to our campus. Now, our campus doesn't work for everyone, but remember, we have 700 plus individuals of the chronically vulnerable individuals on site on any given day, and that number continues to rise. It makes no sense to have these individuals who have all sorts of ambulation challenges, mental health challenges, who when they leave our campus are exposed to predatory behaviors, temptation, to force them to navigate our community, and also to have the pushback from certain community members who do not like the loitering or do not like some of the behavioral elements. Why not bring community providers to our campus and increase their reimbursement rates, to increase their ability to engage the individuals? We, as you probably all know, have 7.5 acres and 12 buildings. We have the space that's not being used and the density of population. I'm urging everyone to look for opportunities to better leverage that for the benefit of our community. And we want to make that available, a safe and sober environment for individuals to access services, not only our guests, but the community, and to broaden it, to not think of it as just a place for overnight shelter, but a place that can help address some of these areas of impoverishment, the things that cause people to fall into homelessness or cause people to make it more challenging to move into stable environments. And we believe that our group of individuals can provide those relationship touches to help individuals feel safe enough that they can walk across and engage with the mental health provider or the dental health provider, et cetera. It won't be that transactional cold feel. So how can we do this better? We need to start building those pieces of communication. I think for too long, perhaps the Eugene Mission has been a little isolated on the edge of this community. And again, that's why I'm so grateful to the individuals sitting at this table with me that we've been able to reach out, even though we don't agree on all things, that those communications are starting to occur. And I would urge you as leaders to look for opportunities for creative resolutions that actually might save this community money, that might save the other our community partners money, where they're not trying to locate services and pay for leases, where, like I said, they might increase their reimbursement rates. I think it could be a win-win, and I think we can cover some of the areas that the TAC cannot. So with that, I'll stop speaking and just make myself available to questions that might allow. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Did you want to say anything in closing, Mr. Manel?
No, I just would say that I appreciate the perspective and the warmth and that Cheryl has brought to the conversation with us, and that the type of service enrichment that she's talking about at the Eugene Mission campus is a great opportunity for us. And I'd also, one of the things that wasn't in the presentation was the hiring of Bob Sorens, there wasn't a date or a bullet point on that, but I so appreciate that he is here to help the community and to help me and Karen with this challenging work.
Okay, good. Well, we'll go right to some questions and comments from commissioners. And Commissioner Bozovich, did you have your hand up?
No, I didn't, but
okay.
I do have a question.
Okay.
Though, so if you're gonna...
Sometimes when commissioners, they move their hands around, I think they're trying to get my attention, and sometimes I don't know. So if you would like to ask questions, this would be a good time to do so.
So I guess, as you were talking about coordinated entry, that kind of reminded me of an issue that's come up recently that Steve's aware of, and I think you might be aware of, and that's over this whole issue of the HMIS system and the release of information that people are having to sign to get into the system, and it's sort of, is it a requirement to get services or not? Then the other part of that is there's been changes in the renewal of the Violence Against Women's Act that created some privacy issues around having anyone that's coming in for DV or SA, domestic violence or sexual abuse services, and their privacy and the federal government's desire to have them in a completely different computer system and the two not talking with each other. Can you talk a little bit about privacy concerns and our ability to track and how that impacts coordinated entry?
Yes, the HMIS, the Homeless Management Information System, does not deny anyone access to services for not providing information to that system. The circumstance that Commissioner Bozovich mentioned was some recent work that we did with the SIUSLA Outreach Services in Florence, where the Violence Against Women's Act is requiring them to separate out their domestic violence and sexual assault work from their multi-service center that they're under contract with for the county. So we've worked through that with folks at the Department of Justice and at SOS, and this is incorporated into the trainings that our staff does for the HMIS system. Anyone who does not want to provide information and feels unsafe as a part of the script that the folks that are entering information have can ask that their information be locked down. And what that means is, for example, if someone comes to the Eugene Mission and requests that for safety, that only Cheryl and her staff person would have that information. There's also another layer that allows for unique identifiers. So someone doesn't necessarily need to provide a name or an address. And what we try to do is there's that boundary. It's important for us so that we can report out what we're doing to gather accurate information and to shield, as much personal information as possible in doing so.
Commissioner Bozovich, can I also add that the HMIS system and the separate domestic violence information system, they are completely separate systems, and so there's not that crossover. And what SOS is doing now is they're actually reconfiguring their staff composition so that you have staff who are only going to be dedicated to providing DV services, and then they'll have to make referrals in the same organization if that person needs additional services to another program, but there'll be different staff that are working on that.
Okay, other questions? Commissioner Farr?
Thank you. I'll be very brief because we don't have a great deal of time, and we can't dig into all of the 10 points or even the 6 points you've made progress on. I would contend we've made progress on all 10 because of the next thing that I'm going to say. I see Becky DeWitt in the audience from the city of Eugene, and I see Cheryl Balthrop sitting here from the Mission, working with Lane County staff. This is the most closely coordinated efforts that I have seen between nonprofits, the Lane County, and the cities in the years that I've been working on human services and on homelessness issues. Cheryl, you're presenting what is really a new vision for the Mission. You're talking about opening your campus to other services to bring actual services to the campus so that people aren't engaging in what the biggest complaint about the Mission is, and that is people loitering around their residences and around their businesses outside of the Mission. So you're identifying what you say is nothing, you said is nothing to do with a TAC. We can cover some of the areas that the TAC cannot. But really, I would contend that the things that you're talking about are woven deeply inside of the shelter feasibility and the homelessness response study that we've done. I think it's all integral. And the solutions that you are suggesting, without going into details, are solutions that we can really take a look at, too. As you've said, it will increase services on campus that increase reimbursement rates. Everybody wins. The providers win because they don't have the questionable nature of whether or not people will show up for their appointment, for instance. So all across the board, this is a great way of providing services. Bring the services where the people are densely populated. You said we have space that's not being used, and we have the density of population. What a great combination. Empty space, dense population. So without going into too much detail, I am highly excited to see Becky in the audience working, and the slide, the very first slide that you showed that showed the team that's working together on this, which included people from the city of Eugene, people from nonprofits, some people with lived experience. And even though the city of Springfield's not at the table a lot of the time, the city of Springfield is highly and deeply involved in the solutions that we're putting forward. So it really is a community effort that involves nonprofits and all local governments that I'm aware of. Without going into too much detail, bravo on the work that's been done so far, and bravo on the work that will be done from this point forward. Bob, welcome again. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Bernie?
First, and probably most significant, Ms. Balthrop, Cheryl. We haven't met, so I don't want to assume familiarity. Every now and then, I encounter someone whose presence and whose gravitas and whose obvious heart-head connection has to be recognized, and you are one such person, and I thank you so much, and I mean that sincerely. And oftentimes I talk about so many times in our society we focus on money and not people. One can put that in religious terms, but I really like your terms of transactional, not relational. So thank you. Did I hear you say that the Eugene Mission has 12 buildings on 7.5 acres?
That is correct.
How many square feet is under roof?
Oh, my goodness, I should know that, and I do not.
I take back everything I said. No, I'm just kidding. What is the condition of do they need retrofits? Are they leaky?
They are modest, but we have a lot of office space that could be used and would be quite easy to adapt.
Well, I'm not speaking from the board, but speaking for myself. When someone offers me that kind of square footage and that kind of open door, and perhaps
We have parking, I might note.
I'm very excited. In fact, if I may, I would love, for the first time in 25 years, to revisit the Eugene Mission property. Now I'm going to go to a little more detail. Barrier busting. Tell me I have this wrong. So we're looking at more dollars to bust through the bureaucratic barriers that dollars have created. Is that correct?
I think that's one way to capture it, yes, Commissioner Bernie.
That's probably the wrong way, but I'm just trying to get my head around this. I know that the city of Eugene and the county of Lane underwrote the TAC report. This was before my time on this commission. But do you invite the 70 rural communities in the city of Springfield to participate in implementation discussions?
Yes.
And how has that attendance looked from your perspective?
Well, it depends on the convening. So, one, for the convening that's happening next week, we did a broad invitation to the major communities in the county in terms of.
How many major communities are there in the county that you made? No, I'm just curious.
Right, so of course I think of this metro area of Eugene, Springfield, but then the third largest city, Cottage Grove, and Veneta, Junction City, Florence. I'm still learning the community.
Well, that's okay. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I know there's 70 some out there. So
Yes.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I interrupted you.
And then there are community convenings that or service providers, come together, and they represent rural communities. And also many of our contracts, like with Food for Lane County, et cetera, they provide services throughout the county. So when I think of the reach of this, the division that I'm a part of, it is countywide. And there's always a very real concern for what is happening with residents, what services are offered for residents in rural communities. So that is a part of our framework.
No, thank you. Could I ask one last question? I would be curious how you all, I'm just floating an idea, how you would see the notion of if we could get the dollars either through county budget or grants or whatever, but through providing stipends to some of the or underemployed people that are in neighborhoods and in communities where, and training them on what the resources are for homeless and other populations. You're going to interrupt? Or do
I'll answer.
Steve, I don't see you with this enthused that often, please. I was just going to finish real quick. So whether you think there might be a opportunity to create paraprofessionals from people that are in underserved neighborhoods who are already providing mentoring and relational kinds of activities, coaching, assisting elderly with some of their yards or taking them to church or to doctor's visits, and providing a stipend, providing them training, they understand the resources, and really allowing you to really reach out more deeply into communities to direct people to services. Is this something that would be of assistance? Is it just some harebrained idea?
Well, it is part of it is part of what we're discussing in implementation. That we need people who have lived experience. Part of the design of our MLK Commons is to have peer support folks who are working there, who have been unhoused before, who have gone through recovery and want to get back to the community. There's also, we have, under the Poverty and Homelessness Board, we have a workforce committee. I have a workforce section of my division. And we do have homeless employment training programs. What we've discussed most recently is supported employment, where people who've been out of the workforce are given some additional support and are compensated for their work.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm pleased to see some good progress happening for the implementation. I know you have to do your work in order to make the rollout smooth. What I do know that the public will come back and ask is, what will we see as a result of the work this summer, this winter? How do you see what has been accomplished so far in results in this upcoming winter strategies?
I could take a stab at Commissioner Bush. So one of the things I'll say is, in terms of the TAC report, it had a broad view that there were structural changes that need to be in place, a public shelter, the 350 permanent supportive housing units, as well as those system improvements before you would get in 36 months to some of these desired outcomes. I looked at a report this week based on the 2018 data, which shows fewer people in our system than we experienced in the point-in-time count in 2019, that we could get to an unsheltered population of 0 in those 36 months if we made those changes. So to me, it's a question that can't be answered sufficiently without the changes in the capacity to the system. And I haven't seen that change. And we don't have new beds. We don't have yet new PSH. We have yet to fully implement those recommendations. So I guess what I'm saying is, how do we temper the expectations of the community that want to see results now? And I think we temper that by saying the plan has increased capacity for shelter and housing as well as system improvements that, frankly, in 6 months, I don't know how realistic that expectation is, or 9 months. So what
My concern is that we're not going to be able to temper the public's interest in making sure that there's additional housing strategies for the year. I mean, when we see a homeless woman run over in an alleyway, the conversation is only going to extend as to what we're going to do. And that's why we see Mr. McAllister up here always advocating for what are we going to see, what are we going to do this winter right now. And so what I want to see happen with the TAC report is as we have wins and as we have progress with the work that you're currently doing, we see some on-the-ground actual work being done that the public knows we are doing something right now that really makes a difference as soon as possible. Because winter's coming. And we need to be doing, as we all know, more. And what I want to see from the work that you're doing and from our eventual person that we'll be hiring with the name yet to be determined is those results on the ground. Otherwise, we are never going to be able to meet the expectations of the public in which we are trying to serve and those who want to serve them. In addition, I had a separate question, which is, you touched on with Commissioner Burney, which is regarding the rural communities. I have spoken about the TAC report in rural communities. 6 out of my 7 cities are all rural, very small, very little resources. And part of their reaction is, well, the TAC report isn't really going to affect us. It's all about the Metro Center and serving homeless folks within the Metro Center. And what we're seeing is, even in the youth, that they won't come to utilize the services in the Metro Center. They will stay in their community. And so how are we extending even these short wins with maybe the mobile units into those rural communities? And how can we make sure that they're equitably addressed in the overall picture of the TAC report?
So I would say that you've identified, Commissioner Bush, an important piece, which is our ability to expand on mobile outreach. And as a part of that, to have staff or nonprofit staff that are available, in rural parts of the county. When I've attended the community roundtable that the city manager in Cottage Grove holds with folks from the city and the schools and social service organizations, the discussion of, having somebody on the ground who can reach out to folks and provide that relationship, provide that connection, really is a first step. I'm not going to say that it is a panacea. I think from our work with our Fuse project, one of the things that we've seen is, even before we're able to shelter or house some individuals, just through the engagement, through the barrier busters, through the friendship that's developed, people make strides. And we also measure that by things like reduction in arrests, reduction in, going to jail, and, reduction in emergency room use. So, I think as we implement this, we just need to continue to keep our eye on the prize. Also recognizing what Cheryl pointed out, that that we have a lot of people who we're trying to help who have complex needs, and so it challenges us to look at our behavioral health and mental health system and our addiction services and those sorts of things as well.
Commissioner, may I speak to that? In addressing our focus on wanting to keep people connected with their community, our experience is the best thing we can do for folks is to keep them in their community, that it destabilizes people when we relocate them to communities that they're not familiar with. So the extent to which services can be delivered to where the people are, we think would be the best. And that's why I want to make it very clear, when we're talking about the density of individuals that are at the mission or in that location, they're already there. We're not asking for folks to be relocated and destabilized and brought to the mission. We're looking to have those rapid rehousing and other options shut off the spigots or keep people stable where they are. But for the folks that are already suffering, let's address their impoverishment there. So there is a distinction.
I understand that. What I'm trying to get at is that these smaller communities don't have shelters. They don't have the same systems that we have in the Metro Center. And what I want them to feel is a connection to that coordinated work that you're doing. So people in Oak Ridge know that line of communication is there, and they're receiving the kinds of benefits that we know can be there. They're out in Florence, or my hometown, Veneta. It's actually pronounced Veneta.
Thank you.
Those people know that what you're doing here also affects them, and being really articulate about which ways that it can help them.
Thank you. I just, first of all, wanted to thank all of you for being here, but just to say some things for the benefit of the public and the board about Ms. Balthrop. I want you to know that not only is she currently and almost coming up on 1 year as executive director of the Eugene Mission, but she was a shareholder and a named partner in the law firm Gatos, Churnside, and Balthrop, which is a very prominent law firm in Eugene, and over, 25 years there. Among her many other accomplishments, president of the Eugene Chamber of Commerce. So we're really lucky to have someone with your breadth of experience. What are we now into 10 months, almost 11 months of being in a new role. And this is really very exciting for all of us that want to pull together all the different elements and try to do a better job with what we have. In terms of collaboration, it just ups the whole community game. So thank you for your willingness to do this. I just have one question, and it's a kind of a two-parter, but I'd just like to hear everybody's perspective on this. Will it take more money, and where will that money come from? Do each of you have an answer to that? Will it take more money, and where will it come from? Just briefly answer that if you can briefly answer it. Well, maybe there isn't a need. There may be no need for the money.
I'll take a stab at that. There definitely is a need for more resources, which includes money. Cheryl has mentioned like in the mental health and alcohol and drug areas, the fee-for-service work. you know, there are elements of engaging people. There are elements of outreach and elements of this work that are not billable. We can leverage, you know, federal and state resources that are available, but it's going to require us to have, you know, some local resources. So, and how we do that, I think what's real important, and it's come out in the discussion today, is you as a Board of Commissioners, you have a strategic plan. You have made a commitment to look at improvements in our mental health crisis system. You've made a commitment, and Karen Gaffney is going to talk about this intergovernmental agreement with the City of Eugene. So that is a beginning. We're going to have to show results to the community, and like everything else in life, we're going to have to earn the trust of the citizens of the county and be creative.
We take no government dollars, so it won't cost anything for our services. And it is my hope and prayer that I can just leverage community relationships and get businesses, get educational facilities, get folks to rally behind the work that can be done, the volunteerism that's already present in this community, and support the work that government officials are doing.
In terms of...
With your vast experience in Lane County.
Yes. So one of the things that my boss has on my agenda is by the end of the year, we'll be putting together a plan for what that will look like in terms of our needs for outreach in particular.
Okay.
And the other pieces related to filling out our needs for support in terms of our HMIS training. So we definitely have a goal to present to you in the budget cycle, what that would look like in terms of needed resources.
One thing I totally enjoyed off of Ms. Balthrop's website was the quote from Dear Abby: "If you want your children to turn out well, spend twice as much time with them and half as much money." So maybe that doesn't entirely apply here, but there are a lot of similarities to that. I noticed that we're past our noon time. Do the commissioners want to work through lunch or take the next item or take a recess till 1:30? I'm open to suggestions here.
I think the next item connects to this one, but I don't have a lunch.
Okay.
I'm good for a full lunch hour. However, this next item does connect, and I'm personally, I'll stay. I'd love to stay for it.
Okay, well, why don't we?
Can I, real quickly?
Sure, real
I'm sorry.
quickly. Yeah.
So the answer I heard to Commissioner Buck's question was no. We will have nothing to show at this point in time for this winter.
No, that's not true.
Is that not correct? Excuse me, that's what I heard, so please.
I don't think in terms of additional resources, there's been any allocation of additional resources.
Okay, so here,
Outside of what we did in the budget.
right, outside of the budget. So here's what, I'm sorry, Commissioner, here's what I would like to say in terms of that. I acknowledge the incredible work you are doing. And I become a Steve Manella fan from, now that I understand, you know, what he's been able to do in terms of the operational workings of this county. I hope you are all extremely uncomfortable, as I am, until we can say yes to that question and point at it. I don't think that it's the interests or I understand institutionally managing expectations, but really it's responding to need. And I think we represent the people that so sometimes we'll get frustrated. But you understand the dynamic, and I think that's a healthy dynamic, that's all.
Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify, there have been significant increase in resources made in our adopted budget from this year. We proposed and the board approved a significant increase in the amount of resources for winter strategies. We've doubled the number of beds available through the Dusk to Dawn program, which is a contract with
Okay, I
St. Paul. We're currently working with Carry It Forward and Mr. McAllister to identify a location for 5 or 6 Conestoga huts, as well as covered space for both storage and office. For those nonprofit organizations, we're working with 15th Night on a youth shelter, converting county facilities, spending several hundreds of thousands of dollars on retrofitting space to allow for homeless youth to be sheltered during the winter months. So I think it's really important to note that over the course of the last several years, we've seen a steady and consistent increase in both funding and staff allocation and partnerships. We understand that we still are not meeting the complete need in the community, but I'd also point to the city of Eugene and say that the city has also allocated additional resources. Both the city and the county identified funding in their approved budgets for additional staff positions that'll go towards this work. So we have a lot of work to do, but yes, there has been increased resources and effort in this area.
Okay, so I'm feeling the need to press on to item 7B, Order 19-10-01-03, in the matter of approving an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Eugene for implementation of the Homeless and Supportive Housing System report recommendations. Karen Gaffney is coming to the table to introduce this item. We set it up as a 5-minute item for your presentation, a 5-minute item for commissioners' deliberation. And before Ms. Gaffney begins, I'd like to call on Commissioner Buck.
I just wanted to state that my declaration from item A in this section applies to this section as well. Thank you.
So, Ms. Gaffney, go ahead and give us the briefing.
Mr. Sorensen and Commissioners, I promise to be brief. I won't even take my full 5 minutes. This item really is the next step implementation of the item that you just heard and the update on the TAC report. The policy decision in terms of allocation of the funds that are in this IGA you actually made during your budget process. So what we have in front of you today is to ask permission for delegating the authority to the county administrator to sign the intergovernmental agreement that we've been working on with the City of Eugene. I'm going to take just a moment to lift up and I think maybe add a little bit to the end of the last conversation you were having, and I appreciate the county administrator's summary of some of the concrete progress we've been making, and I absolutely, Commissioner Burney, appreciate the value of that constructive tension of holding us accountable, and absolutely I encourage you to continue to do that. I know we all entered this work with a clear commitment to making a difference for the people who live in Lane County. So we are in that mission together, absolutely. The allocation that will be part of this intergovernmental agreement covers 3 positions, and you talked about them during the last item. One of them is this strategic leader who we, as you know, we're still looking for. The other 2 are actually much closer to boots on the ground that will help deliver some of those immediate results. We knew going into this that constructing new permanent supportive housing has a timeline on it that's not going to show results right away. We have to begin now if we're going to get to those results. In the interim, though, there are some things that we can do. And so the other 2 positions that are included in this IGA are a joint effort from the City of Eugene and Lane County to fund that immediate work, to take a look at how do we improve our systems to help more efficiently use what we have, and that's why these positions in particular were prioritized, to be able to quickly and clearly identify where there are openings in our system, find the person who best fits those openings, move them into that efficiently, and start to create that flow that the TAC report so clearly recommended to us as a system improvement. So I will say it's been exciting working with the City of Eugene on this joint effort and engaging the Poverty and Homelessness Board in this work. And I think that's one of the key ways that we bring the rest of the county and all of those small cities into the conversation is through that process. So I think I kept that under 5 minutes, and I'll turn it back to you, Chair Sorensen.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to turn to the board for any discussion, motions, action, or inaction on this proposed order. Commissioner Buck.
I'll move approval of item 7B, Order 19-10-01-03, in the matter of approving an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Eugene for implementation of the Homeless and Supportive Housing System report recommendations.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Buck and seconded by Commissioner Burney to approve Order 19-10-01-03 as presented. Further discussion from commissioners? Seeing no further discussion, we will go to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. The vote is 5-0, and the order is adopted by unanimous vote. Thank you so much. So we're now going to move on to our recess, and we'll have a recess until 1:30, where we'll have the sheriff and Captain Riley come in at 1:30. So we are in recess.